The story begins on a silent, scary night when a boy runs to save his life. He is very injured because some people have ganged up on him and put him in that condition. He thinks he needs to hide and use that time to recover, and if he has to keep running and won't recover, then he will eventually get caught. He needs to find a way to erase his tracks and hide completely. Suddenly, he sees a fat cat there and thinks up a plan. He then goes toward the cat, and there is a sudden flash of light. The following day, a boy named Jiwoo visits a departmental store, and he looks pretty excited to see cat snacks on sale. He is a cat lover and thinks he should stock up on these snacks because they are usually costly. He thinks if he should get every snack from the store for his cats and seems very excited at his purchases. He thinks for a while and later decides to buy every snack from the store. After that, he thinks he came to this store to buy things for himself, but ended up shopping for the cats again. However, he is happy, thinking that his cats will like them. Suddenly, he notices a little boy running to catch his ball from the road. At the same time, a fast-driving car is rushing toward the boy. The car is about to hit the boy when Jiwoo runs with his super speed and saves him in the blink of everyone's eye. He asks the little boy if he is right and asks him to be careful next time. People wonder about the situation and think about what has just happened there. The boy was about to get hit, but then he just disappeared. Jiwoo leaves the boy there and thinks he is lucky to have the power to save that kid. The kid's mother rushes toward him and asks if he is alright, and she is so scared. She asks him how he got run over by that car, and he points toward Jiwoo and says he saved him. Jiwoo leaves the place quietly and thinks he uses the power because the kid is in danger, but he has almost exposed his powers to the general public. However, it was good that he was able to keep the kid from being hurt. The same night, he brings his cat food for his cats, apologizes to them for being late, and says he just came home late from school. There are 3 stray cats, and it seems like they are always together, and he asks them if they are family or just friends. He notices the cats are not eating food and asks them if they don't like it. He gets sad because he used all of his extra money to buy these for them. It seems like the cats are trying to tell him something, and he asks if they are asking him to follow them. He starts following them and reaches a place where a yellow cat is unconscious and injured. He brings the cat to its home, and when it gets into consciousness, he wonders where he is and when he passed out. He is the same boy from the previous night, who has transformed into a cat. He observes his features and finds out that he has turned into a cat. He remembers the last night when he touched the cat, and there was a flash of light. He thinks he must have been able to transform at the last minute. Meanwhile, Jiwoo comes to him and asks if he is awake. He was worried because he was covered in blood and unconscious when he found him. He is happy that he looks so much better now and says he doesn't have to be so on edge. Mr. Caden wonders who this fool guy is while Jiwoo talks to him, considering him a cat. He wonders if that boy put him there when he was unconscious. Jiwoo asks him to wait there for a while and runs away from the room. He brings cat food for him and asks why he was passed out there. Jiwoo says he didn't look wounded or anything, and he figured out that he would have had wounds since he was bleeding and all. He asks him if the blood comes from somewhere else and if there is a wound somewhere else on his body. Mr. Caden thinks he is a very talkative boy, and he has been at it non-stop. Jiwoo asks him to take his food, which will help him heal faster. Mr. Caden smells the food, but he doesn't like it, while Jiwoo adds something to it and asks him to eat this, too. Mr. Caden gets angry and thinks how he dares want him to eat cat food. Then he realizes that he is in a cat body and should eat up to heal more quickly. He is about to eat the food when Jiwoo lifts him up to see if he is a boy or a girl. Mr. Caden loses his patience and asks him to put him down angrily. Jiwoo looks around and wonders where the voice comes from. He heard a deep male voice just now and wondered if he left the TV on. Mr. Caden again talks to him and asks him to put him down. Otherwise, he will punch him and make another hole in his head. Jiwoo gets extremely scared to see a talkative cat and wonders what is going on there. Mr. Caden says he is too loud, shouts at him, and asks him to shut up. Otherwise, he will open up his skull with his claws. When he gets quiet, Mr. Caden asks him about his name. Jiwoo is still scared and doesn't answer him when Mr. Caden again asks him about his name. He shouts and says he doesn't like having to ask questions twice, and Jiwoo tells his name to him. He then orders him to bring that chair to him and angrily says he doesn't like to ask things twice. Jiwoo runs and brings him a chair. Mr. Caden climbs up the chair and thinks it's weird that he found it very hard to climb. His body is not well, and he can't even climb. He then threatens Jiwoo and asks him to remember what he just said. If he says a word about him to anyone else, then he will die, and Jiwoo agrees to him immediately. Suddenly, he looks toward the mirror and wonders what that fat cat in the mirror is, and it can't be a cat with a double chin. Then he realizes that the fat, plump cat is actually him. He is shocked that he, the great Caden, has turned into a fat cat. He falls from the chair and is still in shock that the great Caden is a puny cat. Jiwoo tries to wake him and wonders what happened to him. He said something and passed out, while he was shocked at thinking he had to stay in this shameful state until he went back. He doesn't have the strength to change into another animal. Suddenly, Jiwoo shakes him hard and asks him not to die, and Mr. Caden asks him to stop. Jiwoo is happy that he is alive, and Mr. Caden asks him to put him down, saying he was never dead. Jiwoo was surprised to see he passed out, but now is glad that he is okay. Caden asks him why he was surprised when he passed out, but Jiwoo just smiles at him. He then again watches himself in the mirror and regrets why he changed into a fat cat. Jiwoo calls him by the name of Mr. Cat, but he asks him to call him Mr. Caden. He asks him how he can speak like a human when he is a cat, and he replies that he is also a human like him. He looks like this now, but he is not a cat but a human. Jiwoo asks him if he is a human who transformed into a cat, and Mr. Caden says he is transformed only temporarily, and it's difficult to explain to him, so that he won't explain anything else. Jiwoo is still shocked and asks him if a human can turn into a cat. Mr. Caden answers his question by staring him directly in the eye. As for the second question, he says it was possible only theoretically, but apparently it is very rare. Jiwoo then asks him multiple questions about why he turned into a cat and why he was bloody and passed out. Mr. Caden replies he doesn't need to know that. He says they both met because of inevitable circumstances, and that is all he needs to know. After that, they are awkwardly silent for a while. Then Jiwoo asks him to eat cat food because he was passed out for a long time, and he is also wounded. Mr. Caden replies he already told him that his transformation is only temporary, and he is telling him to eat cat food when he knows that he is a human. Jiwoo says he is the cat for now, and it's not good for a cat to eat human food. He doesn't think he should eat human food, especially since he is hurt. Mr. Caden understands the situation, and Jiwoo leaves him there, saying he is going to feed other cats while they are hungry for a long time. After that, Mr. Caden thinks Jiwoo is right. He heard it's bad for cats to eat human food, and since he has completely transformed into a cat, then it would be right for him to eat food that is good for cats. He will need to force feed if necessary if he wants to recover as soon as possible. He then sniffs the food and starts eating it slowly. Sometimes later, he eats all the food and thinks he ate stupid cat food, but now he feels so lazy. His body is not fully functioning, and he doesn't have much strength left either. He thinks he will be dead meat in no time if he discovers now. He needs to stay hidden until he can regain his strength. After a while, Jiwoo enters his room and says he is going to step out for a minute. Caden asks him where he is going at this hour, and he replies that he is going to the animal hospital since he doesn't have any cat food for tomorrow. Mr. Caden stares at him suspiciously, so he asks him if he wants to come with him. He asks him why he should come with him, and Jiwoo asks him if he is not worried if he tells other people about him. Mr. Caden agrees to come up with him to monitor him since he can't trust him. Jiwoo holds him up and is about to leave when he shouts at him and asks what he is doing. Jiwoo says he is hurt, so he is going to take him to the hospital. He tries to resist and asks him to put him down and how he dares to treat him like this. After that, Jiwoo ties him in his shirt, and he feels so comfortable in this state. He then asks himself to get a grip because he is not a cat. He is just a little tired, and he feels like this because it's his first time being a cat. They walk on quiet streets and reach the animal hospital after some time. The doctor asks Jiwoo what he is doing there at this hour, and he replies that he wants to get some cat food and wants him to see his cat because it's hurt. Mr. Caden stares at him angrily and thinks this little boy tricked him. The doctor asks Jiwoo to put him down there, but he has never seen him before. He asks about his name. Jiwoo says his name is Kaden, and the doctor says this is a fancy name for a cat that looks like that. He then checks him up from every body part, and Kaden feels so embarrassed by his actions. The doctor can't see a particular problem, and Jiwoo says there was some blood in his fur when he found him. The doctor says there were only some scratches, but he has already treated them. After that, the doctor says the cat needs to go on a diet, while Kaden stares at him and thinks he is going to murder this man. The doctor doesn't give him any prescription today and asks him to keep watching him and bring him back if there are problems. After that, they come back home when Mr. Kaden calls him and asks if there is a monster cat in the neighborhood. Jiwoo doesn't understand what he just said and asks him what he is talking about. In the meantime, a big monster cat appears from the side, and it looks more like a tiger than a cat. Mr. Kaden says he gets a feeling that it's a cat, but his eyes look very scary, and his gaze looks like a tiger. Jiwoo asks him what they should do, and Kaden suggests they should run away from there. Mr. Kaden says he is quicker than he thought, and he didn't think he would know what to do in this situation. However, at this rate, they are going to catch up with them pretty soon. Suddenly, the cat jumps upon them and is about to hit Jiwoo with his claws, but he dodges him and falls to the ground. Mr. Kaden asks him if he is alright, and Jiwoo says it's just his jacket and asks what they should do now. They need a weapon or something, and Jiwoo takes out a fish rod from his pocket and tries to scare the cat. Mr. Kaden is shocked at his action and asks what he is going to do with that. Jiwoo says this is the only thing he has right now. The cat jumps toward Jiwoo to attack, but he is so scared that he closes his eyes. Suddenly, he is shocked to see that the cat is really playing with his fish rod. He then asks Mr. Kaden to run away, but he is also trying to catch the fish rod. Kaden goes into flashbacks when he defeats everyone with his lightning power. He always kept challenging other people and kept winning. Renowned Awakened are no longer accepting challenges from Kaden, and they are avoiding fights with him. Kaden can be considered one of the strongest Awakened. Someone asked him to come to him, and he will make him his second in command and let him rule the world alongside him. Similarly, many other organizations try to contact him and ask him to join them. He comes into consciousness when Jiwoo calls him and asks what he is doing while he is playing with the fish rod. Suddenly, the monster car jumps upon him and grabs the fish's prey in his mouth. Jiwoo and Kaden are shocked at his speed while the cat again stares at them with his flashy eyes. Jiwoo is appalled at what he should do now, and he observes the scar on the cat's eye is lightened up. Suddenly, the cat's eye spits the stuffed toy on the floor and jumps toward them to attack. Jiwoo again jumps from the place and dodges its attack. Kaden is shouting at his stupid body and wonders why it makes him do such things. Jiwoo grabs him quickly and runs away from there. Meanwhile, the cat is looking for them in her furious avatar. Jiwoo is running to save his life and also holds Kaden with him. After some time, they reach downstairs and say it was really a cat, as Kaden had predicted. He wondered why it looked like that, and it was so strange and so big. Kaden says maybe it was angry because it was hungry. After a while, Jiwoo says they can relax because he can't see him anymore, and they may lose him. Kaden says they managed to run away, but what will happen to other people when they come across him? It's late, so there is nobody in danger now, but that cat will attack when it finds another victim, and it can even jump right into people's homes. Jiwoo is worried and asks what they should do, and he doesn't even think about that. Mr. Kaden says the only solution is to keep running away, but Jiwoo says they should help people because they are going to get hurt. Kaden asks him to call in a report about the cat, but Jiwoo says he doesn't have his phone. Kaden says there is nothing to do unless he is planning on stepping up. Jiwoo gets excited and says he can step up. Kaden is surprised and asks what he is talking about and why he would get involved in this matter. Jiwoo says he is too pessimistic to be a cat, and Kaden asks him what they can do and asks if he hasn't seen his claws. He says it's none of his business, and he is just talking nonsense now. However, he observes that Jiwoo is serious about his decision and wants to step up, but he doesn't even know if he will survive. Jiwoo asks him to go back home and says he will do something about the cat. Meanwhile, Jiwoo remembers the cat and thinks he is really a nice kitten. He doesn't know why he turned that way, but he can't just leave him like that. Mr. Kaden says he will help him if he is so eager to help the cat. He is ready to give him a tiny portion of his power to use in battle, and then he will be able to suppress the cat. Jiwoo gets happy and asks if he can really do it, and Kaden says the effect will only last for a short time, so he shouldn't blow it. He asks him to lower himself to his level. He then touches his head, and Jiwoo can feel his touch, which is so soft. Suddenly, an immense amount of energy overflows through his body, and there is a huge electric shock throughout the city. Jiwoo can feel power overflowing in him, and there is electricity, too. Kaden tells him that his power is electric, and Jiwoo says he is going to go look for the cat. But Kaden says he doesn't need to look for it because it's already there. Jiwoo comes forward and asks Mr. Kaden to step back while Kaden brags and asks why he is asking him to stand back. He is surprised at Jiwoo's confidence and thinks he has his power, but he should still be scared of that cat. His fear wouldn't disappear only because of his power, and Jiwoo calls the monster cat and says it came to his house some time ago. He asks him what happened to him, but the cat doesn't seem to understand him and rushes toward him to attack. Kaden shouts from his place and asks him to get away, but Jiwoo can't move. He then sits in his place, and the cat can't touch him. It tries to attack him again and again, but he dodges it every time. Mr. Kaden thinks Jiwoo's evasion skills weren't just luck, but he can track and anticipate all of the cat's movements. However, the cat's speed is just too fast for a human to do that, and Mr. Kaden observes that Jiwoo is not ever using his power to dodge the cat's attacks. Jiwoo remembers what Kaden said, that he could fight the cat with his power, but only for a short time. So, he needs to save the power and use it when the time's right. When he gets the chance, he moves at super speed and appears behind it. Kaden is shocked at his movement and thinks that is not the power he gave him. The monster cat is unable to keep up with his speed. He wonders if Jiwoo has super speed powers, while at the same time, he jumps upward and punches the cat using Kaden's power. There is a sudden flash of light, and when it disappears, Jiwoo is sitting on the ground and seems very tired. Mr. Kaden comes to him and says he was so confident during the fight. He asks if it was because of his power. The monster cat is knocked out, and Jiwoo hopes that it doesn't die. Suddenly, the cat decreases in size, and Jiwoo is sure that it is the cat that came to his home. Kaden says they made a racket so that people would come there soon, so they need to go from there. On the other side, a man is standing on top of a large building and looking for his sample, but he can't find it on the tracker. He saw the marker flash in this exact location about an hour ago and wonders if he was forced to awaken the imprint within the sample with his powers. He angrily breaks his phone and thinks he can't avoid the hunters if he has to use his powers. He thinks he has no other way, but he can't let a powerful sample like this simply slip away. He releases his dark energy and looks for his sample. On the other side, Jiwoo takes the cat back to his home and gives him first aid. He says he did the best he could and asks Kaden if it is enough. He replies that the cat is just shocked and knocked out, but it shouldn't be a problem. Jiwoo says it will be better to take him to the hospital for proper treatment, but Mr. Kaden asks him what he will do if he wakes up in that horrible form again. Jiwoo is still worried about the cat, but Kaden says if he isn't fine, then there is nothing he can do. He then wonders why the cat turned like that, and it got bigger and stronger. A normal cat couldn't have done that, and he thinks it may be an awakened cat. Jiwoo calls him and says he couldn't tell him before because they were busy, and Kaden asks him if there is something he wants to say to him. Jiwoo wants to tell him about what he did when he was fighting and asks him not to tell anyone about his powers. He says no one can know he can move that quickly, and Kaden angrily asks if he blabs about him being an awakened one. Jiwoo is surprised and asks what awaken means. Kaden asks him if he doesn't know who he is. He finds out that Jiwoo didn't know he was awakened, and he tells him that there are many people like him, too. Jiwoo raises his hand and says he has a question. He asks him if he is awakened, and this is the reason he can move so fast. Jiwoo asks him if other people like him have powers, and Kaden says he is looking at one right now. Jiwoo is shocked to learn that he also has special powers like him. Kaden asks him if he thinks it makes sense for a normal person to turn into a stupid cat like this. He is then surprised to see tears in his eyes and asks what is wrong with him. Jiwoo apologizes to him for crying and says he just thought himself a weirdo. Kaden asks him if it is his first time meeting another awakened one, and he doesn't even know what he is until now. He heard it's not easy for people like him who don't know what they are. When his mom found out about his powers, she told him never to use them. He used them once without meaning, even when he was little, and he will never forget how his friends looked at him afterwards. They said he was a monster, and since then, he has kept his powers hidden. They had to move often in order to hide his powers, and he didn't talk about it because he didn't want his mother to worry, but he was always terrified. He was afraid people would take him away to a lab and dissect him if they found out. He started to tear up when he realized there were others like him. Caden says it's not a disease but a real power, and there is nothing to cry about. Jiwoo asks him permission for another question and asks him if he can teach him more about the awakened ones. Caden reveals that people like him and people who have superhuman powers are called awakened ones. Little is known about where they came from or when they first appeared. Some have physical powers, while others have psychic ones. Some of them can remotely move objects, break them, or make them explode through compressed force. Jiwoo asks him if they are like superheroes in movies, and Caden reveals these powers are called awakened abilities, which can be developed in many ways. Caden says his power makes him move fast, and maybe even other special things. He asks Jiwoo if he can feel that his power is stronger than before, and he replies that at first, he could only move fast, about a second, but yesterday, he ran out of steam. Now, he can do more. He can move fast for 3 to 5 seconds a day. Caden says he lacks training and is scared, and it makes sense that he has been hiding his powers instead of trying to make them stronger and stronger. Jiwoo asks him if all the awakened ones strengthen their powers, and Caden says they can do whatever they want with such powers. Jiwoo exclaims that he still wants to hide his powers, and Caden replies that this is because he is an exception. However, Jiwoo gets up, apologizing that he gave them nothing to eat because they were busy in the conversion, and gets up to bring them some food. He takes a bread slice for himself and can feel Mr. Caden staring at him, but he turns his face to the other side. He gives them cat food and asks them to eat since he also might be hungry. Caden thinks he will go crazy if he has to eat that stupid cat food. Jiwoo asks him to eat this even if he doesn't like it. Caden thinks for a while and starts eating, thinking he is only downing this stupid food because he is incredibly hungry. Suddenly, Caden feels a dark energy surrounding their house and wonders what is the energy. He doesn't sense it coming because of his current state. The energy doesn't feel normal. All of a sudden, the cat also feels the same energy and gets up in its previous state. It jumps from the sofa toward the window and rushes outside. Jiwoo and Caden are still shocked and wonder what is wrong with the cat. Jiwoo asks Caden what he should do now, and he replies that the cat woke up so soon because of the energy around them. He then observes that Jiwoo is doing something and asks him what he is doing. He replies that he has to find the cat again since it could attack someone else. Caden asks him to stop and says it was unavoidable the first time, but he doesn't need to step up a second time, and the cat is not going to have the strength to attack again. Jiwoo replies that it will be easier to catch him this time, and he is worried about other people and the cat, and they can't let him hurt anyone. Caden agrees and is ready to accompany him, and Jiwoo gets excited at his decision. Caden replies something was up with that cat, and he also noticed an unpleasant energy outside. Caden asks him not to think he is doing this for him or anything, while Jiwoo says he is so grateful that he is coming with him. After that, they go outside, and Jiwoo runs in the streets and looks for the cat. Judging from his fight earlier, Caden observes he has good speech and advanced movements. He is confident that his super speed and related abilities have been developed enough as well. Jiwoo asks him what he meant by associated abilities, and Caden replies that to move fast, he needs good reflexes, cognitive abilities, dynamic vision, and such. Jiwoo has physical abilities like that on top of his speed. It's common for awakened ones to have multiple abilities. After that, Caden instructs him to move toward the left, and Jiwoo moves with his super speed and runs toward the street. Caden asks him how much longer he can maintain his super speed. Jiwoo replies he used it during the fight, but some time has passed, so he has about 2 more seconds left. He thinks he can use it multiple times if he uses it in short bursts. He asks Caden about the cat and asks how he can predict his direction, and he replies he has just got an idea. He can feel the evil energy from his surroundings and says it's all related to another awakened one, and he thinks that is where they will find the cat. He asks Jiwoo to get himself ready to face another awakened. On the other side, the cat is walking in the street, and the professor finds it and says it reacts to the imprint, so he is the one. He asks him what happened to him, and it seems weaker somehow. The cat is scared to see the professor and remembers the cage he was put in and the man experimented on him. He is about to touch him when the cat reacts. He says he is more aggressive now and wonders if its imprint broke during the experiment. He then feels its energy is getting stronger, which means he has been awakened. In the meantime, Jiwoo and Caden reach there, and they can see the cat with a weird man. He is about to go there when Caden shouts at him and asks him to hide first and see what is happening there. Jiwoo asks him why they need to hide when they can see the cat they are looking for. Caden replies if he can't see the human with him, he must be awakened. He tells him that he can't jump blindly at an awakened one, and he thinks it is related to that man, and the energy was a signal calling that cat. He is relieved that the man is not chasing him and wonders if he came to find the cat. In the meantime, the cat angrily jumps upon the professor to attack, but he uses his energy and throws it backward. He gets seriously injured, and the professor exclaims he is dying because of that hit. He then uses his awakened energy, holds it up in the air, and asks him to handle his attack. The cat seems to be in a very bad condition, and the professor asks him to get up again and face him. Jiwoo is watching all this, and Caden says he is stronger than he thought, and is controlling his powers just by flicking his hand. He wonders if his power is psychokinesis since he is using it against the cat. Meanwhile, the professor observes the cat and says his movement skills and durability are better than normal cats, but it's not enough. He wonders if this is all he can do in his awakened state. He kicks the cat, but it gets up again, which means he didn't pass out. Meanwhile, Jiwoo sets his cap and says he doesn't know what is going on, but he needs to save him, and the cat is weak because it fought him. Caden asks him not to be stupid because he has already told him that the man is awakened. He asks him if he thinks it will be the same as taking on a cat. He asks him not to be naive and what he is going to do, and asks him if he just thinks that man just stands and watches as he takes away the cat. He asks him what he will do if that man tries to kill him, too, and if he is ready to fight him with his life on the line. He didn't even know he was awakened until now, and now he is going to fight one. Caden is sure he feels confident after beating a cat, but fighting an awakened one is quite different. Jiwoo is sad, while Caden thinks he should understand now that fighting between awakened ones is a dangerous affair with lives on the line. He can't fight another awakened one when he just discovered his powers. At the same time, the cat gets up again, and the professor asks him to fight him again. The cat just stares at him, and he asks why he is not attacking him, or if he is just threatening him. The cat tries to run away, but he smiles, uses his awakened power, and holds it up in the air. It falls to the ground, and the professor exclaims it's a pity that the performance wasn't up to snuff. But at least he learned something valuable, and he should dispose of it properly. Jiwoo is watching all this and says it is cruel, and he will try to save the cat with his powers. He says he will not try to fight him, but he will save the cat with his powers. Caden forbids him and says even if he is quick, that man is awakened, and his senses are not the same as normal people. Jiwoo apologizes to him for not listening to him when he is worried about him. Like he said, his powers may be useless, but he might get hurt, but he wants to save the cat. He moves quickly while Caden wonders what he is trying to do. He thinks that Jiwoo is going to appear on the other side to catch his eye and then snatch the unconscious cat. If that's his plan, then he won't have enough time to use his power and might not be able to get away. Meanwhile, the professor moves toward the cat when Jiwoo appears there at his super speed. The professor wonders where he came from and is trying to steal his sample. He attacks him with his power, but Jiwoo disappears in no time. The professor looks around for him, but he can't find him anywhere. He thinks he must be a tracker and he shouldn't use his power so carelessly. He thinks he needs to get away before another tracker appears there. On the other side, Jiwoo and Caden are running, and he exclaims that they did it. Caden is worried and says he knows that Jiwoo exists and that he will be in great danger. However, Jiwoo is just happy and says he couldn't just leave the cat there when he could save him. Caden becomes answerless and thinks he is just a foolish idiot. He didn't know he would succeed because he was right in front of that guy. He also moved much more quickly than he expected. Jiwoo happily exclaims that he is so excited now, and he realizes that the power he tried to hide is not the problem. Moreover, he did something to be proud of with his newfound powers. On the other side, the professor is angry that he lost his sample and says he worked so hard to build that sample. He calls the boy named Wuan and says they have trackers on their tail. The sample that ran away was a success, but he lost it to a tracker. He says they have to leave this place to get away from trackers, but they can't just leave a potential breakthrough behind there. They have to run experiments using the date from the place and look for the escaped sample. He asks him to move with care from now on. On the other side, Mr. Caden checks for the cat's condition. Jiwoo asks him how he is, and he replies that he will live, but his body has experienced significant trauma. He is going to need plenty of rest. Jiwoo thought he was in big trouble after that fight, and Caden says if it were a normal cat, he would surely have died. The wall he hit collapsed entirely, but because he was awakened, he was able to keep fighting. Jiwoo is surprised that the cat is awakened, and Caden also thinks he wasn't sure before, but after that fight, he is sure now. He had never seen an animal awaken before, and he had once heard that experiments made animals quasi-awakened. He wonders if that man experimented on him and put him into a dangerous case. Jiwoo calls him and asks what is wrong since he doesn't look good. He slaps him and says he is not well because he created problems by taking on an awakened one. Jiwoo says he didn't want to do it either, but he had to and saw what that man was doing. If he left the cat alone, then he would have died for sure. Caden shouts at him and says what he did isn't important, and the thing important is that he was hostile to an awakened one and ran away with his cat. He won't ever stop chasing him until he gets it back and will chase him until the end. Jiwoo hopes that he will surely chase him that long since he just saved a cat. Caden thinks he is just an idiot, and he doesn't even understand what he did. He thinks forced awakening experiments are strictly forbidden, and that man lost evidence of his crime, and he is going to come looking for his cat. It's more dangerous because they don't know what he is actually doing. He is sure that to keep this a secret, that man won't hesitate to kill Jiwoo. He thinks this kid just found out that he is awakened, and he is already in way over his head. He wonders if he should explain all this to him, but then thinks he only realizes what he is, so he is better off not knowing. Even if he knew, then nothing would change, so what good would it be to tell him about all these things? After a while, Jiwoo calls Caden and asks if he is mad at him. Jiwoo apologizes to Caden for worrying him. Caden again shouts at him and asks why he will be worried about him. He shouts and says he is not concerned about him, but is worried about himself and what he got himself into. He then asks him to watch out from now on, and he makes an enemy with his actions. After some time, Jiwoo's alarm rings, and he hurriedly gets up for something. Caden asks him where he is going when he is in the middle of doing something. Jiwoo replies that he is going to school and can't sleep because they spend the entire night treating the cat. He then left enough food for him to eat the whole day and asked him to make sure to eat it. Suddenly, he stops and asks what would happen if the cat wakes up when he is not there and if he goes back to that state again. Caden says if this is what he is worried about, then he will watch him. He needs energy to transform, but he doesn't have enough right now, and the cat looks weaker than when he attacked them. However, he is the great Caden, and that cat can't do anything to him. Jiwoo appreciates him and says he is just amazing. He brags and says people have been telling him that for a long time, and he is considered one of the greats, and he is not even at his level. Jiwoo says he must have been great as a human, but he can't really see it now that he is just a fat cat. Caden gets angry about this and yells at him furiously. Jiwoo runs away from there, but returns after a while and asks if he will be there when he comes back from school. He asks him to stay up with him until he gets better, while Caden just stares at him quietly. After that, he thinks Jiwoo insists on him so much to stay, so that he will stay there for a bit. He then looks at himself in the mirror and gets angry again at his appearance. After some time, 3 cats enter Jiwoo's house, and they seem to like Mr. Caden and come to him. He asks them to get away from him, and they start eating his food. They don't listen to him when he stares at them furiously and makes them tremble. He then remembers Jiwoo told him that 3 cats told him about Caden, and he found him lying there wounded. He changes his mood with the cats and allows them to eat his food, saying he doesn't like cat food anyway. The cats stare at him for a while and start eating again, while Caden thinks they are just voracious eaters. After that, he picks up a canned food for him and wonders how he will open up this one. He uses his sharp nails and opens up the box. He starts eating quietly when the other cats appear behind him, and it seems like they want his food too. After a few hours, Jiwoo comes back to his home and calls Mr. Kaden. He is then surprised to see other cats sleeping peacefully after eating a lot of food. He wonders how the cat opened the cans and what they cut them with. He is surprised at this while Mr. Kaden is also sleeping peacefully. Flashes back to the past when Jiwoo was just a kid. He was sad because his friends called him a monster because of his powers. His mother tried to persuade him, saying he was just different from others. He asked her if it was wrong to have powers like his, and she replied that it was not his fault. Jiwoo asked her why they were running away from the people if it was not anyone's fault, but she answered his question. He didn't have any friends because of this, but his mother couldn't do anything for him because she wanted to hide his powers. After that, he always looked at other kids playing while he just watched them from a distance. One day, a cat came to him, and he cried out of fear. But after that, he got familiar with cats, and he always made cats his friends and played with them. Suddenly, he woke up from his dream after the teacher called and asked him to get up. He stated he wouldn't say anything because he is normally not like this, but he has been sleeping through class 2 days in a row. Jiwoo asks him if the class is over, and the teacher surprisingly tells him that it is over. He asks him if something is wrong with him, and if it is, then he can share his problem with him. Jiwoo doesn't seem to listen to him and says he has to go if the class is over. He runs away from the class while the teacher just calls him from behind. He thinks Mr. Kaden must be waiting for him. Suddenly, he strikes Wooin, asks him if he is alright, and apologizes for colliding. Wooin doesn't reply to him and leaves him there. Jiwoo remembers he is the guy who transferred to his class last month, and again apologizes to him and runs away from there. In the meantime, Wooin receives a call from the professor, and he asks him where he is. The professor gets angry with him when he tells him that he is in the school. He asks him if he considers himself a real student when he lets him join the school for a while. He asks him how he can attend school when there are trackers about. He asks him to get back to the lab right now and calls him useless. After that, Wooin just watches the normal students around him and leaves the school quietly. On the other side, the monster cat wakes up and can see other cats around him. One of the cats comes to him and tries to touch him, but he roars at her angrily. It gets scared and moves behind. The cat jumps from his place and moves toward them with his evil energy, while the poor cats seem so scared of him. He jumps up from his place to attack them, but before he can attack them, Mr. Kaden appears from the side and kicks his face. It falls to the sofa and again passes out. The other cats jump happily and seem to praise Kaden for his bravery. After some time, Jiwoo enters the home and asks the other cats how they have been. He asks Kaden if he ate well when he was gone, but he doesn't reply. Jiwoo asks him to eat even if he doesn't like cat food. He can see empty cans around them and says he was worried for no reason, and they all ate well. He is worried about that cat and thinks he hasn't woken up yet. Kaden tells him that he woke up once right before he returned. Jiwoo gets happy and thinks he was worried that he would never wake up. Jiwoo is happy that the cat is awake, and Kaden calls him and says he is curious and says those 3 cats are strays, and he doesn't keep them in the house. Jiwoo says he doesn't keep those cats as pets. Kaden asks him why he has so many cat things, and Jiwoo says there is no particular reason, and it's not really any of his business. Kaden says that is for him to decide. Jiwoo then tells him that when he was young, he didn't have friends because of his powers, and they moved around a lot, and he didn't get close to anyone just in case he used his powers by accident. However, he wanted friends, and the first friend he made back then was a cat. He was a stray cat, too, but he always stayed by his side when he was having a hard time. Then one day, he just vanished. He looked everywhere for him, but couldn't find him anywhere. Then his family moved away, and that was it. He never saw him again. Now, when he comes across a stray cat, he just tries to help them out. He was always buying cat food, treats, and toys, and just piled up into what he sees there today. The main thing was always providing for the cats he found. He smiles and says it's not much of a story, and Kaden turns his face and says it's not much of a story. Jiwoo says he is so tired, and he slept through school, but he is still sleepy. Kaden says it makes sense he used the powers he gave him, so his body must be drained. Plus, he stayed up all night. Jiwoo agrees and says he is more tired than usual. He lies down on the ground and says he is going to take a nap. He then calls him Mr. Caden and says he is so happy to have him there. He says he should stay at least until he gets better. Caden asks him to stop yapping and start napping, and Jiwoo says he is so tired and will talk to him later. On the other hand, the professor experiments on cats, and he uses the same drug, but it doesn't work. He asks Wooin if he is sure they are all dead, unlike the awakened one who got away. He replies that he confirmed, and it has been an hour since it went into cardiac arrest. The professor grabs his head and says it's really dead then. He says he needs more time, and it's time to show them some results. But at this rate, the trackers will be on them soon. He asks Wooin to bring more animals to experiment on, and he replies that they have used all the animals they have. The professor asks him to go and catch some more, but he tells him that people started to notice animals disappearing in this area, and the police have intervened as more and more reports are filed. The professor attacks him with his awakened power, and his face starts bleeding. He asks him how he dares to talk back to him like that and orders him to get animals from somewhere else if he can't get them from this area. Wooin is then about to leave, and the professor calls him a useless boy. He thinks it took them so much work to get there that he can't just leave now. On the other hand, Jiwoo sleeps peacefully in his house while Caden tries to get his energy. He opens and closes his fist, but he can't gather enough power, and it's more than just the wound, and he has used too much power recently. Moreover, he lent Jiwoo power when he was in such bad shape. However, he didn't have a choice then, since God knows what would have happened to him if he had not given him his powers. He is also worried about the professor because forced awakening is banned in their world because it's too dangerous and inhumane. He won't stay put after Jiwoo has found out what he was doing. He may have chosen to run away rather than look for Jiwoo, and if that's the case, then they are off the hook. But if not, then Jiwoo might be in danger. Suddenly, he observes that Jiwoo is sweating and seems scared while sleeping. He wonders if he is having a bad dream. He thinks he is bound to have bad dreams, and after that horrific incident, he realizes that he is an awakened one. After that, he is shocked to hear that Jiwoo says his chest feels heavy, like something heavy is pressing down. Caden realizes that something heavy is himself, and he is sitting on his chest. He feels embarrassed and thinks that he got on him unconsciously. Jiwoo gets up and says he had a bad dream. He feels like someone is choking him, and he can't breathe. Caden acts randomly and asks if he had a bad dream, and Jiwoo says it may be because of the previous incident. He exclaims that they are worried about the same thing, and now he is worried after all Caden has explained to him. Caden taunts him and asks if he is even listening to him, and he thinks he is an idiot because he is all smiles. Jiwoo smiles and thanks him for worrying about him. He says it feels good in a strange way. Caden gets angry and shouts at him, saying he is not worried about him. He is only telling him this because he treats him well and thinks the great Caden is not worried about anyone. After a while, he turns behind and says he will teach him one thing. If he is that worried, he will teach him how to develop and efficiently use his powers. Jiwoo asks him if there is a way to do that and is happy that he will teach him. He then takes him to the basement and says he doesn't have much stuff in the basement, and it's what he is looking for. Caden asks him to begin and says he has been using his powers blindly. The only reason it has developed is because he has been using it for a long time. But if he uses his methods, he will be able to create and efficiently use his powers. However, he asks him not to expect his methods to bring drastic changes, since power doesn't grow all of a sudden with just a couple of days of work. It takes a very long time, and depending on his talent and approach, he may not see results for several years or even decades. Jiwoo asks him if he will not work on him, and Caden says it depends on his talent. Using the power efficiently is different from developing the power, and it will take him several months even to reach his level. Jiwoo asks how long it took him, and Caden exclaims he is staring at the man who invented the method. He asks Jiwoo to come to him and touches his heart with his paw, and Jiwoo feels this similar to when he gave him his powers. Caden asks him to listen carefully. The power is in his heart, and the power spreads to the rest of his body like blood. He will channel his powers into him, and he has to feel how powers move and grow, and he has to remember that feeling and do it himself one day. He then asks him to begin, and Jiwoo can feel electrical energy flowing through his body. There is an immense amount of power all around, and after some time, Caden says it will be hard to do what he taught him on his own. However, if he tries hard for several months, then he will learn quickly. But he is shocked to see that the power is moving in Jiwoo's body just like he taught him. Kaden asks him why he is moving so early. After that, Jiwoo tries to flow the energy inside his body, and Kaden thinks he channeled powers into him to make him feel the movement of energy. And it's only been hours, and he's already managed to channel energy through his heart. After that, Jiwoo says he is doing as he is instructed, but he can't figure it out, and he doesn't know if he is accumulating his powers or not. Kaden says he needs a lot of practice, and he is actually progressing really fast and needs to take his time. Jiwoo says he thought he would at least be able to feel the energy moving around in his body, and he certainly felt something just now and thinks he may not be talented enough. Suddenly, the alarm rings and Jiwoo gets up and says he is going to be late for school. He then comes downstairs, says he forgot his food, and puts cat food in his bowl. He then says goodbye and says he has to get to school but will leave the food for the 3 cats in the front yard. When he has left, Kaden observes that he seems to prioritize food for the cats, who are overeating himself. He then thinks Jiwoo is so talented, and the difference is too small for him to realize, but he is gathering energy inside his heart. It's what naturally happens in the process of gathering energy. It's the first time he has seen someone progress so fast, and he thinks his method was really that effective. He realizes that he has never taught this method to anyone before, and if he had taught this method to other awakened ones, then they probably would have progressed just as fast as Jiwoo. He concludes that Jiwoo could be more talented, but his method is what helped him improve so fast. Moreover, his method allows Jiwoo to detect energy flow within his body, and it's not Jiwoo who is a genius, but he is the genius of Great Kaden. Suddenly, the 3 cats rush to the house and start eating his food after finishing theirs, but he stares at them and asks them not to even think about treating that. They step back, and it looks like they understand him. He then observes the unconscious cat and remembers the professor who was talking about the forced awakening experiment. Meanwhile, the cats try to love him, and he agrees to give his food to them and asks them to leave him alone. After that, he felt sleepy in his class and was so tired because he hadn't slept in 2 days. He thinks so much has happened in the past few days, and these days with Kaden have been much more fun than when he was alone. After some time, he wakes up at his teacher's calls, says this is getting out of hand, and asks him what is wrong with him lately. He is shocked and just stares at him, while the teacher says he has been sleeping since the morning, and the class just ended. He is letting him off because he used to be such a good student. He then asks all the students if anyone knows why Wooin is absent today, and he is not even picking up his phone. Jiwoo is also surprised to see that Wooin is absent today, and his chair is empty. After school, he goes home, happily thinking Kaden should be waiting for him, and wonders if he ate the food he left for him. Suddenly, he observes some students are bullying Wooin, and they also put his bag upside down. They are surprised to see that he only has let food in his bag. Meanwhile, Jiwoo calls him and asks what he is doing there. The boy interrupts and asks him to do his business, and Jiwoo says that the student is his classmate. One of them moves forward and tries to hit him, but Jiwoo dodges his attack. He is shocked and asks him how he dodged that attack. He tries to hit him again, but Jiwoo dodges this time, too. The other one comes forward and says he will hit him now, but he keeps dodging their attacks while Wooin and one of their friends are just standing quiet. Jiwoo then asks them to stop because other people are staring at them. Their friend shouts at them and asks what they are doing, and they are just embarrassing him. He then calls Jiwoo and asks if he is the kid who keeps feeding the street cats, and Jiwoo asks him how he knows about this. He asks him to watch his back, and he won't let him off so easily the next time. When they are gone, he comes to Wooin and asks if he is alright, but he doesn't answer him and leaves quietly. Jiwoo follows him and asks why he didn't come to school today, and the teacher says he didn't answer his phone. He asks him if he has pets in his house since he has so much pet food in his bag, and he tells him that he only has a cat. Wooin doesn't answer him, and Jiwoo turns to his street and says goodbye, but he still doesn't respond to him. After that, he comes to his home and calls Kaden, but he is not there. He greets the other cats and asks them about Kaden since he can't see him. He goes upstairs to look for him, but he is not there too. Jiwoo gets worried and wonders where he is. He looks at every corner of the house but can't find him. He gets disappointed in thinking Caden has left his home without saying goodbye. He shouts angrily and wonders why Caden left him without even saying goodbye. He asked him to stay at least until he got better and should have told him at least. Meanwhile, Caden is in the bathroom and is listening to his voice. After some time, Jiwoo sits behind him and apologizes to him, saying he was just worried when he said that. He said that because he thought he had left him without saying goodbye, he had promised him that it wouldn't happen again. He again asks him to forgive him, and Caden asks him to leave, saying he understands him. He asks him to forget it, and he is past it now. Jiwoo asks him if his shouting interrupts his business in the bathroom, and Caden shouts at him about this and angrily hits him. Jiwoo gets scared and asks him if he can put his paw down, and is glad that he is still there. After some time, they observe that the cat is awake and gets attentive to face its reaction. The cat remembers them and roars at them for attack. He realizes that Caden was the one who attacked him last time, gets scared of him, and starts licking its paw. Caden asks Jiwoo if he also thinks that the cat is acting weird, while he goes to the cat and picks it up. He looks toward him affectionately and says he is glad he is awake. He asks Caden if he needs to take him to the hospital. He looks so calm now and asks if he will be calm at the hospital. Caden replies he is not calm, but is in shock. Jiwoo says he wants the vet doctor to take a look at his condition and asks Caden to accompany him if he wants to. Caden asks him why he wants him to come with him, and he refuses, saying he doesn't want to go. Jiwoo promises him to give him treats if he accompanies him. Caden didn't reply, so Jiwoo added they were out of treats and needed to get more from the market. After some time, they are going toward the doctor, while people look toward Caden and find him a cute cat. Jiwoo asks him if this isn't a cool night perfect for a walk, but Caden doesn't feel good to take a walk. Meanwhile, Wooin passes through the street and finds Jiwoo with two cats. He recognizes the cat in Jiwoo's jacket and remembers it's the professor's sample. He remembers the professor was talking about traitors, and he lost the sample to one of them. He thinks Jiwoo is the traitor who took the cat away from the professor. After some time, Jiwoo takes the cat to the animal hospital, and the doctor asks him what brings him there at this hour. Jiwoo asks him to take a look at the cat and says it may be hurt. Caden sees a stool at some distance and sits on it. The doctor tells Jiwoo that the cat looks fine and that his bones are healthy. He then looks toward Caden and says this cat needs to lose some weight, and that is just for starters. Jiwoo observes that there are so many animals in the care unit, and he replies that someone has been leaving sick animals and treatment fees in front of the hospital. Jiwoo is surprised at this and wonders who it can be. The doctor says he just treated 2 urgent cases, and they were all in dire condition when they arrived. Someone may have abused them, but the animals had no visible wounds, but they had other problems. He lacked the required equipment, but they all seemed to show serious drug addiction symptoms, which makes them shocked. On the other hand, when Wooin goes to the professor's lab, he asks him where he has been all this time. He replies that he was cleaning up the animal carcasses. He asks him to be careful when outside since they never know when the trackers might show up. He seems worried about the rejection of his experiment and says he repeated the exact same procedures as before. Wooin calls him and asks about the power of the tracker he saw last time. He replies that he saw his super speed. He dashed in front of him and then ran away with the sample. He tried to stop him, but he was way too fast. He wouldn't have gotten away if he hadn't been caught off guard. He is determined to be ready the next time he sees him and will definitely kill him. At the Hedam High School, there's a lot of commotion in the classroom as the pupils are chatting among themselves. When he saw Wooin walking into the classroom, he waved his hands in his direction. Upon seeing Jiwoo, Wooin recalled that Jiwoo had super speed because of the time he had dashed in front of Wooin and then fled with the sample. Jiwoo says to Wooin that he had come to school, but Wooin did not respond. Jiwoo became a little embarrassed and grinned. Unaware that the two were buddies, 2 of the kids made fun of them and asked how they became so close, since everyone in the class is aware that Wooin hasn't said a word since the day he was moved to the new school, and Jiwoo hasn't interacted with anyone. One student draws the conclusion that he believes the Lunars will eventually come together in some way. The teacher is writing on the board while teaching the class. Jiwoo is looking at his kitties and occupied with his phone. He swiped the first picture, which showed Mr. Caden entering a room and saw 3 cats lying on top of one another. He then swiped the slide again, this time showing all 3 cats dozing out. The person watching Jiwoo, Wooin, believes that trackers are often experts with expertise in questions. Has Jiwoo acquired any more training? On the other side, Mr. Caden walks into the room as he is already having difficulty walking. He wonders what is wrong with him because he feels weak suddenly and can't even stand up straight. He also wonders if his wounds are the cause of this. When he sees 3 friend cats of his lying on the floor, he gets a little confused. He is terrified and believes that his 3 companion cats may have died because someone is trying to harm him with their powers, but as one of them turns over, he discovers that they are all napping. He finds it hard to understand that they sleep all day and believes that the sun is to blame for his own feelings of drowsiness. He can no longer stand and is overcome with the need to sleep, wanting to lie down and doze off. He makes the decision to just stay out of the sun, rest, and regain his abilities. In the meantime, his body falters and he lies on the ground. As he lies there, thinking that the great Mr. Caden is incapable of falling asleep, he feels as though he is about to nod off. On his way home, Jiwoo notices a cat sitting on the wall on his walk home. He opens his bag and begins to search for his snacks. Jiwoo opens one of them and asks the cat if he wants to eat since he is hungry. The cat sniffs the food and Jiwoo tells him it's okay to eat. When Wooin gets there, he calls Jiwoo Seo. Jiwoo glances over and sees that Wooin has called him. He tells Wooin that it's good to see him there, and Wooin asks Jiwoo where he got the cat from. Jiwoo then informs him that the cat is not his and goes on to say that he was only feeding the cat because he believed the animal was hungry. Wooin informs him that the cat he's talking about is the one Jiwoo had last night, not this one. Jiwoo informs him that he was on his way to the vest as Wooin also saw him. He had seen the cat before, it disappeared and then reappeared, and it looked very hurt. That's the reason Jiwoo decided to look after him for a bit. Jiwoo inquires as to why he is asking. Wooin then tells him that he believes it could have been his cat. Jiwoo asks him if he still has his cat. Jiwoo runs to his house to retrieve the cat and asks Wooin to remain there till Jiwoo returns with it. He tells Wooin that he will bring the cat so that Wooin may determine whether it is his. While Wooin was waiting for Jiwoo, he began to wonder if Jiwoo was a tracker, since if he was, he wouldn't have been so eager to show Wooin the cat. Jiwoo then goes home and gets the cat. Mr. Caden asks Jiwoo what he is doing. He replies that he believes he has located the cat's owner and leaves the house, promising to return shortly. With the cat in his arms, he rushes towards Wooin. He shows Wooin the cat and inquires as to if it is his, to which he responds that it most definitely is. The cat opens his eyes and becomes aggressive as he is about to grasp it in his hands. Jiwoo asks the cat what's wrong and begs him to calm down. Wooin tells Jiwoo to give the cat to him and place it over him. Jiwoo queries Wooin once more about his certainty that the cat he lost is the same. Wooin concurs, but Jiwoo is perplexed as to why he is acting in this manner given that it is his cat. He queries Wooin once again, asking whether he is certain that he is the cat's owner or if he is telling lies. He queries Wooin as to why, if the cat is not his pet, he is taking it. Jiwoo is told to give the cat to Wooin, who warns him that keeping it will put him in danger. When Wooin hits Jiwoo, he claims that Jiwoo left him with no other option and that Jiwoo would be gone for a few hours. Jiwoo denies giving the cat to him. Jiwoo dropped to the ground with the cat in his hands. Wooin uses some sort of magic to draw the cat towards him and pick him up. He uses his awakened powers and holds the cat in the air while it shouts. After a while, the cat becomes unconscious and Wooin grabs it in his hand and is about to leave. Suddenly, Jiwoo gets up and asks him to stop, and Wooin is shocked to see that he gets up soon after his attack. As he is ready to go with the cat in his hand, Jiwoo suddenly gets up and asks him to stay. Looking back, Wooin notices that Jiwoo is standing behind him. Wooin is shocked to see Jiwoo as he struck him in the neck, and he is still able to stand up. Jiwoo stands up and asks Wooin why he is doing all this. He questions him why he attacked Jiwoo and why he is after the cat. Wooin says to Jiwoo that he does not know how he crossed paths with the cat and instructs him to forget everything that happened, including the cat. Jiwoo needs help understanding what Wooin is talking about and what is going on. Suddenly, Jiwoo remembered the professor and asked him if Wooin was working with the awakened one who was after this cat. Wooin turns around and questions Jiwoo if he is really the one who took the cat from his mentor. Jiwoo can't understand his statement as he mentioned his mentor. Wooin realizes that Jiwoo's power is super speed and decides to attack before Jiwoo can even react. He attacks Jiwoo with his awakened powers. Jiwoo falls to the ground. Wooin concludes that his speed is amazing as he is fast enough to steal a cat and get away from his mentor. Jiwoo realized that Wooin was awakened too, and he was working with the horrible professor. He further thinks about the purpose of Wooin and what he is planning to do with the cat. Jiwoo uses his awakened power and is about to snatch the cat back, but Wooin predicts his movements and moves the cat back so that Jiwoo cannot take the cat back. He thinks that Jiwoo is able to close distances, but he only has fixated on the cat. Even with his super speed, his movements are too predictable as he is making it easy for women. Wooin again attacks Jiwoo and throws him far away. Jiwoo is all in pain, and the pain he is suffering from is unbearable. Wooin sees Jiwoo suffering like this and wonders how this can be possible. If Jiwoo had been tracking them, then he would have been better trained, but everything about him, including the way he moves and fights, could have been more varied. Jiwoo opens his eyes and sees the cat. He again tries to snatch the cat from his hand. He moves forward using his power, but again, Wooin holds him by his collar, puts him against the wall, and asks him about his identity and aims, what he is, and for whom he works. Jiwoo couldn't understand what Wooin meant when he said for whom Jiwoo works. Jiwoo asked him what he meant. Wooin recalls all the days in the school when Jiwoo did not speak to anyone and asked him if he was not tracking Wooin and his mentor. But again, Jiwoo was unable to understand and asked him why he would be after him. Wooin concludes that if he really is not a tracker, then tracking them would not make much sense for a novice like him, as he thinks that he just happened to get caught up in this mess. He warned Jiwoo to forget about everything that happened, including the cat, Wooin, and his mentor, too, to forget all of it. Jiwoo is sitting on the ground and coughing. He questions himself about what he has done and remembers the time when he brought the cat to his home. He puts his hand on the wall and tries to stand up. On the other hand, Mr. Caden is awake from his sleep as he spends all his day sleeping. He sees here and there but can't find Jiwoo anywhere and thinks that he is still not home as he hears him saying something to Mr. Caden when he is dozing off. Mr. Caden remembers that he said that he had found the owner of the cat and would be back soon. Mr. Caden thinks that it is strange that he found the owner of the cat, and also, he thinks that he's been gone for quite a while now. On the other hand, Wooin takes the cat back to a professor, who, when he sees the cat, becomes as happy as Wooin finds it. He says to him that he is very useful today, and it results in him achieving anything when he sets his mind to it and appreciates Wooing on his good job. He takes the cat back from him and puts him back into the cage so he can resume his research on the cat, as other samples couldn't survive his experiments. But on this cat, he can begin his work again. He asks Wooin how he found the cat. He says that he found the cat by chance and further says that he found a man who had it and took it from him. The professor turns back and says that he is lucky that he, by chance, found the cat. He further asks him what happened to the man who had the cat and questions him if he killed the man. When Wooin tells him that the man ran away, the professor says that he should have killed him and that it would have been difficult, though he had super speed, and instructs him to make sure that he takes care of him next time. Professor pats his shoulder and appreciates Wooin as he did a good job and found the sample as it is more important. He says to him that they shouldn't waste any more time as he needs to get back to work. The professor goes outside, saying that everything is okay now. Wooin saw the cat who was imprisoned in the cage. Jiwoo, who is standing outside the place where Wooin went, questions whether he can rescue the cat from inside, and remembers that he used the last second of his power to catch up Wooin. Suddenly, he hears a sound. He sees beside him that a professor is sitting on the stairs and asks Jiwoo if he is looking for something. Mr. Caden goes to find Jiwoo. He goes to the animal hospital to see if Jiwoo is there or not, but he can't find Jiwoo there either. He wonders where Jiwoo is. He then concludes that Jiwoo is not a kid, so he must be fine wherever he is. He questions himself as to why he is worried about the Jiwoo idiot. He stops and thinks that it bothers him that he is nowhere to be found, plus he should be lying now. He thinks that he is a troublesome kid. On the contrary, Jiwoo sees the professor and thinks that he is the awakened one who hurt the cat. He needs clarification about what he should do now. The professor is sitting on the stairs and asks him if he is looking for something as he is looking in that direction. Jiwoo gets a bit confused and tells him that he was passing by there. The professor asks him if he is lying to him, but Jiwoo denies it and says to him that he is not lying. But the professor tells him that he had been looking in that direction for quite some time. The professor thinks that he is strange and that he has seen him somewhere before. He suddenly remembers that he is the one who took his cat from him. When the professor remembers it, Jiwoo starts running as the professor knows him. Suddenly, the professor uses his power to stop him, and Jiwoo falls to the floor. The professor goes downstairs towards Jiwoo and asks him what he thinks and where he is going. Wooin hears the noise from outside. He sees the CCTV cameras and recognizes Jiwoo, who is lying on the ground. Meanwhile, when the professor sees Jiwoo, he questions himself as if the tracker is just a kid. Jiwoo stands up and tries to use his power, but suddenly, the professor uses his power and attacks Jiwoo. Wooin comes outside from the office and sees that the professor is attacking Jiwoo. Professor tells Wooin that someone was on his tail, and thanks to Wooin, he is able to catch him. As Wooin is just seeing all that is happening, the professor goes towards Jiwoo and taps his ass and tells him to get up, but Jiwoo is unable to stand up after the hit that professor made on him. The professor wonders what kind of tracker Jiwoo is, who is unable to even stand up after just a single blow. But then he realizes that the hit he made was heavy. The professor asks Wooin if Jiwoo is trying to run away when they are distracted. He says to Wooin that he will have trouble. He uses his powers and asks him to permit him. Wooin tells the professor that he must have hurt Jiwoo when he tried to take him on, so now he can't use his powers to fight back. The professor asks Wooin about Jiwoo if he is alright, to which Wooin says that Jiwoo is alright and further asks the professor to let him take care of Jiwoo and asks him not to worry about him. The professor agrees and is about to go. Wooin gets a bit too relaxed, but suddenly, the professor turns around and says that as he is still angry about what he did so, he will attack Jiwoo to make sure. He again uses his powers to attack Jiwoo's leg. Jiwoo screamed in agony and pain. The professor attacks his leg, which should slow Jiwoo down even with his superpower, and asks Jiwoo to stop overacting, as if it is just a broken leg. He goes near Jiwoo and starts beating him. He asks him if he thinks that he can make the professor a fool and further asks him who he works for. The professor is continuously beating Jiwoo and asking him to speak. Wooin, who is looking at all of this, calls Professor. However, the professor does not listen to him as he is busy beating Jiwoo. Wooin calls the professor in a loud voice once again and asks him to stop beating Jiwoo. He tells him that he is not a tracker, nor is he after them. Professor, when he listens to Wooin, becomes surprised, as it is shocking to him that Jiwoo is not a tracker. He asks Wooin what he means. Wooin explains to him that he took the cat away from him, but he is not a tracker. The professor gets confused and asks Wooin what he is saying. As he said earlier, he took the cat from a tracker, and now he is saying that he is not a tracker. Wooin tells the professor that Jiwoo is an awakened one, but he is not a tracker. He tells the professor that he thinks Jiwoo took the cat away from him because he thought that the cat was being abused. The professor asks Wooin if Jiwoo goes to school as his uniform looks familiar, to which Wooin tells him that Jiwoo is in his class. The professor asks if it is true and asks Wooin if he lied to him. Wooin apologizes to his professor and explains the reason for his lying, as he thinks that the problem will be solved if he brings the cat back. After listening to him, the professor becomes angry, and out of anger, he uses his power on Wooin to attack him. He hit him so hard and pushed him back against the wall. The professor told Wooin that he would deal with him later as he needed to take care of Jiwoo first. The professor concludes that all of this was just a coincidence and says to Wooin that he will not believe it. Wooin, who is still seeing all this in shock, the professor questions if it just so happens that an awakened one is in his school, and that awakened one happens to steal their sample, and he thinks that all just happened to occur. The professor further says that regardless, it doesn't matter whether he is a tracker is irrelevant as he saw their experiment. They can't let him live. As the professor is about to attack Jiwoo and kill him, Wooin suddenly uses his powers and attacks the professor from behind. Professor inquires Wooin if he just attacked him, to which Wooin tells him that he did not attack him. He missed his attack on purpose. He apologizes to the professor and further says to him that he cannot let the professor kill Jiwoo. The professor becomes angry when he listens to this and shouts at Wooin, saying his abusive words. Mr. Kaden, who is searching for Jiwoo, listens to a noise. Professor asks Wooin if he has lost his mind and how dare he stand in the professor's way, and uses his power on him. Wooin apologizes to him and tells him that he used his powers for him. The professor asks Wooin to shut his mouth and uses his awakened power on Wooin and throws him far away by using his power. The professor says to him that he saves him from human body experiments. He fed Wooin, clothed him, and taught him, and asks him if this is how he betrays him. He attacks him again and, while attacking, says to him that he will deal with that kid after he deals with Wooin. Wooin also uses his power to defend himself and attacks the professor. After attacking the professor, he again apologizes to him for attacking him. The professor gets angry and asks how to dare he attack his sir. Professor also once again attacks Wooin. Wooin also, in return, attacks him after attacking. He asks the professor if he is right. Professor concludes that Wooin has grown up, and that's all right. He asks Wooin, so let's see how strong he has become. He enables his power and, with full force, attacks on Wooin. Wooin gets attacked and falls to the ground far away. A professor once again attacks Wooin. He holds him up in the air with the help of his awakened power and then throws him away on the ground. Wooin becomes seriously injured. The professor then goes near Wooin and asks if that's all he has got. He further states that he dares to betray him, even though his skills are so weak. Wooin replies to the professor that he did not betray him. When the professor hears it, he becomes angry and starts beating up Wooin, asking him to shut up and telling him that he betrayed him for that idiot. He further says that he saved Wooin and taught him everything he knew. As the professor beats Wooin, Mr. Kaden, who is searching for Jiwoo, comes to the spot randomly. He sees the professor beating Wooin, so he concludes that as it is, he is not Jiwoo and thinks about Jiwoo where he is. Suddenly, he sees someone lying on the ground. He sees that it is Jiwoo, who is injured, and blood is flowing from his body. He goes near to him and sniffs him. Mr. Kaden asks Jiwoo if he is all right. Mr. Kaden tells Jiwoo that he told him to lie low and keep his head down, saying he is an idiot. Jiwoo opens his eyes and whispers Mr. Kaden. Mr. Kaden tells him that as he did not come home, he came looking for him, and he sure has a knack for finding trouble. Jiwoo says sorry to Mr. Kaden. Meanwhile, as Wooin is also injured very severely and is lying on the ground, the professor tells him that he will see him later, but he needs to take care of Jiwoo first. Wooin says to the professor that Jiwoo is not a tracker. The professor tells Wooin that it does not matter whether or not he is a tracker. He is an awakened one, as he has seen their experiment, so they can let him live. He turns back and sees a cat near Jiwoo. The professor thinks that it's great as it is a fat cat, and he could do it with more samples anyway, and he should add him to his collection. When Jiwoo sees the professor looking at the cat, he asks Mr. Kaden to run away immediately. He says to Mr. Kaden that he needs to get away from there. Mr. Kaden puts his paw on Jiwoo's forehead and says to him that he doesn't need to worry about Kaden and that he should rest as the great Mr. Kaden will handle this. Suddenly, a flash of light appears all over the place. The flash is so strong that it barely can be seen. All of them put their hands on their eyes as they were unable to see anything and were confused about the power. The professor asked what this power was. Suddenly, a man appears who says that creating so much racket without first securing their surroundings and calls them idiots. Jiwoo, Wooin, and Professor all get stunned to see the man. The man snaps one finger and creates a space isolation. The professor was surprised to see the power of space isolation. Mr. Kaden asks the professor if he thinks this is all too much. As Jiwoo is just a kid, after Professor wonders if he knows the kid, and asks the man who he is. The man passes a smile and repeats the question, who is he? The professor thinks that electric power and so much energy and concludes that it can't be and thinks that, but it can't be and questions why he is here. Jiwoo, from the back, inquires to Mr. Kaden if it is really him. When the professor listens to him, he becomes shocked and asks what? Kaden? Kaden passes a smile once again. The professor realizes that if he is really Kaden, then he doesn't have a chance. Professor says to Kaden that he did not mean to harm him, and if he had known that Kaden knew that kid, then he wouldn't have attacked him. He tells Caden that he didn't know he was a part of this. Caden asks the professor to shut up, stop blabbering, and die. He enables his powers and attacks the professor. Mr. Caden attacks the professor with his powers, and the professor falls on the ground and gets severe injuries. Wooin, who is standing at the back of the professor while holding his injured arm, asks the professor if he is okay. As the professor is still alive, Mr. Caden wonders how he is still alive and thinks that he did not use enough of his powers. Mr. Caden smiles and says to the professor that he will dispose of him this time. Wooin comes in front of the professor and asks Caden who he is. He realizes that he is Caden Break, one of the strongest of the awakened ones. He is known to destroy anyone standing in his way ruthlessly, and his unstoppable personality earns him the nickname of Break, and concludes that Caden and Jiwoo know each other. Caden asks Wooin why he is just staring at Caden in this way, and he asks Wooin to say something. Wooin apologizes to Caden and requests him to spare the professor. Caden asks Wooin if the guy behind him is his professor. He tells him that he is wondering why he is blocking him, even when the professor is clobbering him to death. Wooin tells Mr. Caden that he is not aware that he and Jiwoo are acquaintances. Mr. Caden says that, of course, he didn't know, but unfortunately for him, he does know this kid, and his professor has already crossed the line. Mr. Caden asks Wooin to get out of the way if he doesn't want to die. Professor also instructs Wooin to get out of the way. Wooin turns his face toward the professor and tells him to move aside. Mr. Caden tells Wooin to stay if he wants to die, as he does not mind. As he is about to attack Wooin, the professor suddenly Jiwoo from behind asks Mr. Caden to stop as he thinks that it's enough. Mr. Caden asks Jiwoo about what is enough and asks him if he is not even mad about getting roughed up. He further tells him to forget about being mad and asks him if he even knows what is happening there. He tells Jiwoo that if Mr. Caden had not come, he would have been killed by the professor hands. Caden makes him remember that he had already warned him. He tells him that this world is different from the world he lives in, as the awakened ones become enemies easily if they do not agree with each other. After listening to Mr. Caden, Jiwoo says that he realizes how foolish he is, but he doesn't want Caden to kill someone because of him. Mr. Caden asks Jiwoo if he even knows who he is doing this for. Jiwoo replied that he knows and is grateful for all the times he helped him out. But again, he doesn't want Caden to kill someone because of him and tells him that Wooin is a friend of his, and he also tried to help him. Mr. Caden looks at Wooin and sighed, saying that Jiwoo was a total pushover. Mr. Caden tells Wooin to get lost. Wooin asks him what he said, which Caden once again repeats and tells him to hurry up and get lost. He further adds that if he sees him again, he will kill him. He tells him to consider himself lucky. Wooin picks up his professor and gives him support, and thanks Caden for letting them go. Caden sits near Jiwoo and asks him if he is happy now. Jiwoo thanked Caden, on which he thinks that it's such a nuisance. Caden asks Jiwoo about what is now, and he says that he has to take the cat to. In the evening at Jiwoo's house, as Jiwoo is lying on the sofa and Caden is with him, he puts his hand on Jiwoo and touches his body to check the wounds. As he checked, he tells to Jiwoo says that his leg is broken and tells him that he has used his powers so he can heal a bit faster. The scars will heal in a day or two, and the bones will heal in a few days. Caden thinks that the Jiwoo is so much trouble. As Jiwoo starts smiling, Caden asks Jiwoo did he hurt his head somewhere and asks the reason that why is he smiling, on which Jiwoo replies that this is how Mr. Caden looks like. Mr. Caden tells him that did he really thinks that he was a fat cat, on which Jiwoo replies to him that he is just surprised on how cool he looks like and strong too. Mr. Caden says to him that he already told him that he is awesome, on which Jiwoo agrees as he can see for sure now. Mr. Caden touches his head. Suddenly the three cats come there and start growling. Mr. Caden asks Jiwoo why they are acting that way, on which Jiwoo tells him that maybe it's strange for them to see Caden in human form. Suddenly Mr. Caden starts acting up. Jiwoo inquires what's wrong with him, but with a sudden flash of light Mr. Caden turns into a cat again. Mr. Caden asks why he turned back into this again, as he has no control over his change. Meanwhile, Wooin takes the professor back to their place. He makes him sit on the sofa as the professor is seriously injured. Wooin asks the professor if he is okay and tells him sorry as he thinks that he is the reason for all of this, on which Professor denies and tells him that if he had killed Jiwoo, Mr. Caden would have killed Professor for sure. Wooin says to Professor that let him to give medicines, on which Professor denies and says that it is more important to leave the place first and instruct Wooin to collect all the data. On the other hand, some people are jumping on the roofs of the buildings as they are trying to get in somewhere. As the professor is sitting on the sofa, suddenly, he attacks Wooin, as he thinks Wooin betrays him and says to him that he knew he would betray him someday, that's the reason he didn't teach him anything. As he is attacking Wooin, suddenly he hears his name he sees on his right side. Suddenly a group of people break the door. Professor asks them who are they, on which they answer that they are from the Awakener Union, and he has been arrested for conducting illegal research. The professor says to Wooin that it is all over because of him, and this is the reason he has not taught him everything. A man came forward and grabbed Professor. He asks the man to let go him so that he will kill the traitor with his own hands. Wooin, who is sitting helplessly on the floor, asks Professor what he is saying. A man out of them instructs his team to take the professor away and says to Wooin that he will have to come in too. A lady is in her office and watching the traces left behind on her tablet. A man comes and tells her that the traces have been all but when erased, so it is hard to say for sure, but informs her that this is likely to be the result of Mr. Caden's ability. On which the man further says that the Union doesn't know about this yet. The girl tells her that they cannot let Mr. Caden's presence to be discovered, as if the public learned about Mr. Caden's presence, it would be very problematic for them. The man asks his ma'am about the student too, that what should they do with the student. On the other hand, as Jiwoo is playing with the cats, he is making them tease with a fish which is hanging with a hook. All the cats are flipping and trying to eat the food, while Mr. Caden is thinking deeply about something. He questions himself that how did he change back to cat from? As he realizes that he drained some of his energy, but he really finds it strange. As if his strength was weakened, he should have stayed human. It is not like he transferred himself into a cat. Suddenly he realizes that there is a possibility that maybe he must have done more than just copy the form of that cat he ran into. It wasn't just an outer appearance, but a complete transformation into the cat. He wonders if he has become a real cat, but then he patted his head with his paw and finds it crazy, as he wonders that had his abilities too great for words. He questions himself to how to get back to normal. Mr. Caden chuckles the sample of the professor, who is sleeping peacefully on the sofa, opens his eyes for a minute and then sleeps again. Mr. Caden again realized that he would get back to normal with his powers. That will be a piece of cake, especially when he gets his strength back, and chuckles again. Jiwoo asks Mr. Caden if he has figured out why he has turned back into the cat. Caden looks back and answers him that this is because he is such an impressive being. Even he was not aware of his true greatness. Suddenly he sees a fish hanging with the hook. He jumps immediately to catch the fish, as he thinks that he can't lose. He uses his paws to get the other cats aside, and to get the fish piece he gets successful in achieving it, but suddenly he realizes that he is too much like a cat now. Mr. Caden lay on the rug. When Jiwoo see the sample cat or professor, he gets a bit worried, as he is not still waking up as if he is okay. Caden tells Jiwoo that the cat seems fine, as when he checked his vital signs, he should wake up soon, as he is doing better now than when they found him. Jiwoo looks at the cat as he thinks the cat is shivering. He thinks maybe he is cold, and he gently rubs his hand on the cat. Caden tells him that the cat is fine, but he got carried away during the fight, which is why he left traces of his power back there. He erased much of the traces he could, but he was still worried, so he told Jiwoo that he would go and have a look around, as he was worried that they had alerted the Awakened out there, as they made such a big scene yesterday. Jiwoo says to Mr. Caden that he will go with him, as he feels trapped just staying at home. Mr. Caden asks if he really wants to go outside, still knowing what happened to him yesterday. He suggests that Jiwoo stay at home and get some rest. But Jiwoo laughs and says that his injuries really don't hurt that bad because he is awakened. He further asks that if the great Caden is by his side, what is the need to worry for Jiwoo? Mr. Caden, when listening to this, gets a bit shy and says that, finally, Jiwoo Seo understands Mr. Caden's greatness. Jiwoo says, of course, as he sees Caden's strength with his own eyes. How could he deny it? Mr. Caden feels proud to know this, as Jiwoo Seo has an eye for recognizing talent. Jiwoo tells Mr. Caden that when the man, as soon as he knew it was Caden, He was all fluttered and didn't even fight back, and express his strong wish to become strong with his powers, just like Mr. Caden. Jiwoo asks Mr. Caden how he would become a powerful awakened like him. Suddenly, Jiwoo's phone, which is near to him, starts ringing. He picks up his phone and attends the call. A man asks Jiwoo if he is speaking to Jiwoo Seo, to which Jiwoo asks him to whom he is speaking. He tells his name, which is in Hyaku, and asks for a moment as he wants to speak with Jiwoo. He once again asks the man who he is. Mr. Inhyuk tells Jiwoo that he has advice for him. Jiwoo asks what kind of advice, and he says that it is advice from one awakened to another awakened. He says that he would like to speak with Jiwoo face to face and tells him that he is out of his house. Jiwoo sees his window, and a man standing there is still on call. Jiwoo is surprised to see him. The man says to Jiwoo that he doesn't need to trust him, but he doesn't need to be too suspicious, as if he wanted to harm him, he wouldn't have called him. Mr. Inhyuk comes inside Jiwoo's house and sits on the sofa. He sees here and there and finds too many cats in Jiwoo's house. He says to Jiwoo that he has many cats in his house, to which Jiwoo agrees. Jiwoo asks Mr. Inhyuk what he wants. Mr. Inhyuk apologizes and tells him that his so many cats took him aback. He asks him to allow him to get straight to the point and tells him that they want to help Jiwoo live as an awakened one. Jiwoo asks the man if they want to help him, to which he agrees. He tells him that recently they found out about him and did some research. He apologizes to Jiwoo for checking his background without Jiwoo's permission. He hopes that Jiwoo will understand that precautions are necessary as they must know about the awakened ones in this area. Mr. Caden, who is listening to all of this, wonders why they need to know about all the awakened in this area and wonders whether this area belongs to someone. He had not checked before, as he was in a rush to get away. Jiwoo asks Mr. Inhyuk if he is himself awakened as well. He tells Jiwoo that yes, he is also awake, and he shows his power to Jiwoo. Caden comes to know that controlling wind is his awakened ability and thinks about whether the area is Young-Yu's district. Mr. Caden thinks about Ji-Young-Yu, the famous, highly ranked user of awakened wind ability. Mr. Caden heard that he lived somewhere in the area but didn't realize he was so close. Jiwoo Seo asks Mr. Inhyuk if the ability that he is showing is that wind. Mr. Inhyuk tells Jiwoo Seo that his awakening ability is controlling the wind and that he can use his powers to his benefit in almost any situation. Jiwoo is really impressed and tells him that he can move fast. Mr. Inhyuk and Mr. Caden are surprised. Mr. Caden thinks Jiwoo is a fool and asks him why he tells him his abilities. The man tells Jiwoo that he has only recently learned about his awakened abilities. Jiwoo is a little surprised by how he knows. The man tells Jiwoo Seo that awakened ones try hard to hide their abilities. But Jiwoo says to him that he showed his abilities first to him, and he thinks he should also tell the Mr. Inhyuk about his abilities. Mr. Inhyuk tells him that his ability is quite famous, and what he showed Jiwoo is merely a sample of the power he possesses, so showing Jiwoo his ability wouldn't be of any harm to him. But for someone like him who relies on high speed, things are different, as that kind of ability is more impressive if he keeps it hidden and, at the same time, is less impressive if revealed. Jiwoo realizes that this is the reason he wasn't able to gain the upper hand against Wooin. Also, the women's professor broke his leg to stop him from using his powers. The man tells Jiwoo that it is one of the reckless mistakes that newly awakened ones often make, as there are times he needs to reveal their powers, but it is usually best to keep them hidden. Jiwoo thanked the man for telling him some real facts. The man says that he will be on his way now. He will contact Jiwoo soon and tell him the reason for today's meeting, as he wants to meet Jiwoo and introduce himself. As he is going to stand, Jiwoo asks him a question: why is he helping him? The man passes a smile and tells him that teaching newly awakened ability users the basics is the responsibility of the territory leader, as this has been a long-standing tradition among the awakened. Further, he says that causing a scene and revealing the existence of the world to the world would mean big trouble, and they, of course, don't want it to happen in their area. Further, they also don't want someone who understands their powers to travel down the wrong path. He rises from the sofa and tells Jiwoo not to worry, as they would provide him with the most basic levels of support, so there's no need to be concerned, and tells him that they shall be in contact soon and bid farewell. As he is passing by Caden, he receives dark energy rising. Caden gives him a death glare. Jiwoo asks Mr. Kaden what he should do now. Kaden tells him that he needs to live his life as an awakened person now, and that, honestly, he did not want Jiwoo to have to live in that world. But now he has found out, and it is what he gets from being careless. Mr. Kaden says that on the bright side, they know now that the district belongs to Jae Youngyu, who is one of the few top-ranking Koreans with a pretty good reputation at that, as territories are divided among highest-ranking awakened ones. By the looks of that guy's wind abilities, this district probably belongs to Jae Youngyu, and he concludes that if the district belonged to a group of shady people, they would have tricked a newbie like him into abiding by their doings. Mr. Kaden says to Jiwoo that the fun and games are over, as he has officially entered the realm of the awakened. He needs to get stronger now and learn how to protect himself. Since his leg is broken, he needs to practice controlling and strengthening his powers like he taught him. To which Jiwoo says yes, sir. After listening to his response, Mr. Kaden wonders if Jiwoo even understands his situation. The guy went to Jae Youngyu and told him that it was revealed in the investigation, and after meeting him in person, it is clear that Jiwoo Seo is not involved with the current case. Jae Youngyu asks him if he just happened to meet Dr. Eileen's student Wooin by chance. He tells her that Wooin transferred to Jiwoo's school. She further asks him about the union, and he tells her that he thinks the union needs to be made aware of Jiwoo, which Jae Youngyu says it is best if they don't know about him because the way they barged into their territory to deal with the professor is upsetting. The guy tells Youngyu that he feels they need to protect Jiwoo as he is a nice kid and seems to be good-hearted. On the other hand, Mr. Kaden is sitting when he smells something tasty. He sees that the other cats are eating food. Jiwoo, from behind, bids farewell to Kaden as he is leaving for school with his broken leg. He then leaves the house for school. Mr. Kaden stares at the cats, who are enjoying their food. 3 boys from far behind see Jiwoo. One of them calls the other 2 and inquires if he is the same kid that fought with them and sees his leg as he has hurt his leg. One of them questions the other about Jiwoo's class. As Jiwoo went to his class and slid the door, he saw that Wooin was not in his seat and remembered him. Suddenly, the boys enter Jiwoo's class and ask him if he doesn't think he would see them again, as Jiwoo needs to remember them. The boys abuse Jiwoo for not remembering them, and tells him that he is looking down on them. Suddenly, Jiwoo remembers who they are. They ask Jiwoo about the other boy, and one of them turns his face back and asks the other students what they are looking for. One of them says to Jiwoo that it's too bad as he hurt his leg, and he can't run away like last time, and kicks the same broken leg forcefully. On the other hand, Mr. Kaden suggests the cat to go easy with the food and asks them if they want to look fat like Mr. Kaden. As Jiwoo is on his way to the class with his broken leg, he is wondering about what would have happened to Wooin. He remembers that Wooin got hurt because of him and even fought with his professor and wonders if he is okay. Jiwoo falls with pain. The boys ask Jiwoo if it is paining and tells him that they are just getting started. The boys say to him that he surely knows how to fly. Jiwoo thinks about what he should do now. Normally, he would dodge them, but he can't now because his leg is broken. While Jiwoo is thinking all this and sitting on the floor with his broken leg, he sees the other class students muttering, but none of them comes forward to help him. One of them grabs his collar and is going to punch him in the face, saying that he has had enough of Jiwoo. As he is going to punch him by chance, Jiwoo dodged his attack. He becomes angry and asks Jiwoo if he is freaking dodging him again and kicks the broken leg of Jiwoo. Jiwoo once again fell to the ground. Abruptly, all 3 boys start beating him again and asks him if he thinks he is playing a game. One of them tells Jiwoo, lying on the ground in pain, that they are so bored in school. It is a good thing that they found him, as it looks like they will have fun coming to school for a while. One asks the other about the other kid, the geek with the glasses Wooin. They tell him that they both are in the same class, on which the other guy tells him that he is sure they are in the same class. The other students tell them that Wooin is in this class, but he is not there yet. They say that as they all are there, they should give Jiwoo a beating or ask if they should wait for the next time. Jiwoo remembers how Wooin helped and protected him from the professor as he did not let the professor kill Jiwoo. Jiwoo stands up, and the guy says it seems like he is ready for round 2. The guy asks Jiwoo to stay down unless he wants more. As he is going to kick Jiwoo, suddenly, Jiwoo punches him straight in his face and says that Wooin is his only friend who ever defended him. so he can't let them bother Wooin. He thinks he doesn't need to use his powers to fight with them, even without using them. He is still fast. Jiwoo punches the guy again. One of them abuses Jiwoo and tries to beat him, but Jiwoo defends himself and, in return, attacks him. Suddenly, the teacher comes into the class. As he is very aggressive, he inquires what is happening in the class. As he sees kids fighting in the class, he asks them which of them started it first. He sees those guys sitting in pain. The teacher says to them as if they are again fighting in the class and asks with whom they are fighting this time. When he sees them fight with Jiwoo-seo, he gets surprised as he cannot believe that Jiwoo-seo fights with them as his leg is also broken. The teachers ask someone to take Jiwoo-seo to the nurse, but none of the students agrees to take him to the nurse, on which Jiwoo-seo says it is okay as he can go by himself. The teacher asks him if he is going to limp over there, to which Jiwoo says yes. Suddenly, he sees Kaden at the classroom window, who is clapping for Jiwoo, and says he did well. Jiwoo asks his teacher to grant him an early leave as he needs to go to the doctor to get his leg checked. The teacher asks him if his leg is hurting and tells him to wait as they will go to the hospital together. Jiwoo says that it is okay and that he can go alone. The teacher agrees as he has no problem if it is what Jiwoo wants. Jiwoo thanked the teacher and left. The teacher says someone gets those boys, wakes them up, and takes them to the nurse. Jiwoo asks Mr. Kaden about what he is doing there. Mr. Kaden tells him that he just wanted to look around. He was concerned about what had happened to him recently, and Jiwoo went off and caused more trouble. Jiwoo apologized to Kaden. As Mr. Kaden is walking from Jiwoo, he turns around and tells Jiwoo that he has been living with him for a few days now, so he can tell him how life must have been for him. Jiwoo has always avoided confrontations even though his awakened powers would have given him a huge advantage. He forgets to fight. He probably avoided making friends altogether as he was probably afraid that people would find out about his powers. But most of all, he was afraid of his powers. Mr. Kaden tells him that he doesn't need to be afraid anymore, as he is awakened and his powers are not strange, and they are all not bad at all, as he should feel proud because lots of people envy them for their powers. He suggests he not get afraid and embrace their powers. Mr. Kaden smiles and tells him that they can handle anyone who even thinks about taking them down. Jiwoo bites his lips and smiles as he says yes sir to Kaden. Mr. Kaden then tells him to go to the grocery store to buy some more cat snacks as he likes those meow bites. As they are on their way to buy those snacks, Jiwoo tells Mr. Kaden that Wooin has not come to a school today. Mr. Kaden asks about who's Wooin, on which Jiwoo makes him remember the one who helped him. Mr. Kaden remembers him and abuses Wooin as he wants to save the professor. Jiwoo says that he wonders if he is doing okay, on which Mr. Kaden asks him if he remembers that he almost died back there. As Jisuk is standing on the footpath and sees on his phone and remembers that he gave the duty to Mr. In-hyuk to keep an eye on Jiwoo as he goes to the same school as him. Mr. In-hyuk, sitting on his sofa, is in discussion with Jisuk, who does not know about Jiwoo. Mr. In-hyuk says to him that he must know him. He goes to the same school, on which Jisuk says that he only knows his face. He asks Mr. In-hyuk about the abilities of Jiwoo, to which he says that he knows very well that he cannot answer this. He stares at him and tells him to stop trying to fish for answers he knows he can't give. He tells him that according to the background check, he did not know he was an awakened one until recently. His life was probably hard. Jisuk sees the picture of Jiwoo and realizes that the kid is an awakened one all along. Suddenly, the boys come and call Jisuk. He asks them what's up with their faces. Jisuk asks the boys who did this to them. They do not give any answer to him. He tells them again that he asked them a question and asks them why they are not answering. They tell Jisuk the person who injured them is the kid from their school. Jisuk asks them who from the school would dare mess with them. One of them tells Jisuk that he knows that kid from before, the kid who was feeding the stray cats. He did this to them. Jisuk asked them whether they messed with that kid. They said they knew he told them not to mess with him, but he got their nerves when they were on their way back to school, as they even told him to stay out of their way. They did not mean to disobey him. They further tell him that Jisuk managed to beat them because he caught them off guard. And one of them tells Jisuk that he lunged at them while they were distracted. Jisuk thinks that kid is an awakened one. They would not have stood a chance against him. Jisuk smirks. On the other hand, Mr. Kaden while eating cat chew, says to Jiwoo that he has a very serious problem. Jiwoo asks him in what way, on which Mr. Kaden replies to him that he is problematic in every way. As sipping the cat chew, he asks Jiwoo why he asks such a silly question. Mr. Kaden says to Jiwoo that when he was fighting those 3 guys, everything was wrong except for his speed. His punches were weak, his footing was bad, and his balance and weight distribution were all off. And further says that he relied solely on his speed. The only credit he gets is that he managed to knock them all out. Mr. Kaden tells him that if he continues this way, next time, he will meet an awakened one, and asks if he knows what he means. Jiwoo realized that if he had been better at controlling his awakened abilities, Wooin might not have gotten hurt. Wooin would not have had to block his professor. He questions himself about how he can become stronger. His expression tells him that he is ready to take this seriously. From now on, Mr. Kaden will teach him how to improve his powers. Mr. Kaden replies to him he has only taught him how to grow and control his awakened abilities. Mr. Kaden says to Jiwoo that he will teach him combat moves. Jiwoo says to Kaden, "Yes, sir." To which Kaden replies to him, saying louder. With more vigor, Jiwoo says in a louder voice, "Yes, sir," and starts boxing, and Kaden instructs him from behind to correct his form focus and tells him that his leg has fully healed, so he shouldn't use it as an excuse to start slacking. Kaden asks him to stop and says to him to listen. Most awakened think only of working on their abilities to grow those powers. They focus on their awakened abilities since their physical abilities will improve as time goes on. However, he further says that he thinks he must achieve a balance between physical abilities and awakened abilities. He should not just be satisfied with their powers, but instead also train their physical conditions. Kaden tells Jiwoo that his awakened ability is a physical one, so it is important for him to learn combat skills, as it will help him effectively use his strengthened body. As Jiwoo is very fast, learning basic combat skills will improve his abilities a great deal. As Jiwoo is still punching on the boxing bag, Mr. Kaden tells Jiwoo to focus on the basic punches that he is throwing right now, as it will help him to make him stronger. As Jiwoo feels a little tired, Mr. Kaden asks him what he is doing, as he is starting to slouch, and no one is going to take pity on him for being tired, and tells him that his opponent will see that weakness and use it to their advantage. Mr. Kaden tells him a tidbit, as he knows it's way too early, and instructs Jiwoo to use the method he taught him before when throwing punches, letting the awakened energy run through the chest to his arms. Mr. Kaden guides him to use this power to speed up or even strengthen his power. Mr. Kaden guides him as, just before he makes contact, he channels the energy to his fists to land a devastating blow. He tells Jiwoo that he doubts he would be able to pull it off, but it never hurts to know. Jiwoo raises his hand to punch, and he thinks of all the instructions that Kaden gave him. He follows them and punches the bag. He punches so violently that even the bag falls off. Jiwoo becomes shocked to see even Mr. Kaden also gets surprised to see that he did this. Jiwoo tells him that he did exactly as he said, and it made punches faster and more explosive, as he says to Mr. Kaden that it was awesome. Kaden tells Jiwoo that his methods work. Jiwoo replies that he is the best teacher ever, and he is amazing. In the morning, as Jiwoo is sitting in his classroom, he is yawning because he is so tired because he got so excited yesterday and trained all night. He sees Wooin is absent again, and so concludes that he needs some sleep. The teacher comes into the classroom, and he sees Jiwoo, who is taking a rest by putting his head down on the desk. The teacher concludes that he is a poor kid, as he must be traumatized after fighting those kids, and thinks that he did right, as he warned those kids if they touched Jiwoo, they would be dead. He decides to let him sleep a bit more. On the contrary, Mr. Kaden goes at the research lab and sees, as if he was right, that he left not a single trace behind him. Mr. Kaden thinks that they took off, or did the others take those too, and then removed all the lab equipment. Mr. Kaden sees that every last trace was removed. Suddenly, he hears some noise of footsteps. Mr. Kaden hears that one of them questions the other whether anyone has come by, on which the other men tell him that no one has come. They made sure. Mr. Kaden wonders if they must be the ones who cleaned this place, and wonders if those people are Jeong-Yu's people or some other group. The man in front questions the second man, did he find something else? On which the second one tells him that they refuse to cooperate. Suddenly, they glance at Mr. Kaden, as Kaden also stares at them in aggression, but he realizes that he is left with no other choice. so he immediately changes his mood and becomes a gentle and loving cat. He started licking his paws. The man questions the other ones about how a cat came inside the building and says that it is really fat, probably that it is the fattest cat he has ever seen. By hearing this, Mr. Caden becomes angry. As Jiwoo is going back to his home from school, he realizes that his leg has healed fast. He sees his leg and thinks that Mr. Caden did treat his leg after training, but he doesn't think the pain will be gone too soon. Jisuk calls Jiwoo by his name and calls him for a second, as his other friends are also with him. Jiwoo sees those kids and wonders if they are back to take their revenge on him. Jisuk asks Jiwoo to go somewhere else as they can't make a scene in front of the school, and asks him if they can go. The guy smirked and told Jiwoo that he was dead that day. Jisuk orders those guys to stay there. They ask Jisuk the reason, but Jisuk doesn't tell them any reason and goes to a nice and quiet place with Jiwoo. Jiwoo asks him if they must fight. Jisuk tells him that, as he did to his friends, he can't let Jiwoo go, and they must fight. Jiwoo tells him that it was Jisuk's friends who attacked him first, and they were going to hurt his friends, too. As Jisuk replies to him, he is sure they would have attacked him, and he understands Jiwoo. Jiwoo tells him that they don't need to fight, which Jisuk refuses as he has a reputation to maintain. Jisuk tells Jiwoo not to get afraid as they both have different points of view. As Jiwoo is left with no other choice but to fight, he thinks that it's okay as he can win again. Jisuk asks him to stop yapping and come at him to fight. He says that he is not going to attack him first, so he has a chance to take his best shot. Jiwoo thinks that he should end this fast while Jisuk's guard is down. Jiwoo uses his awakened ability of speed and comes forward to attack Jisuk. But he dodged his attack, and Jiwoo is surprised as if it is true that Jisuk dodged his attack. He again attacks him and punches Jisuk, but he dodges his punch again. Jisuk says to Jiwoo that he thinks Jiwoo misunderstood Jisuk. He holds his punch in his hand and uses his power to attack him. Jiwoo falls to the ground. Jisuk says to him that he told him before to try his best and instructs him not to hold back as he has done with the others. Jisuk asks him to use his awakened abilities to fight him. Jiwoo becomes a little surprised at how Jisuk knows about his awakened abilities. He tells Jiwoo not to be surprised as he heard that from In-hyuk. Jiwoo realizes that In-hyuk is the one who came to the house and remembered that he said to him that if an awakened one is discovered within the managing district, they provide them with help and basic knowledge. He told him that this had been a long-standing tradition among the awakened ones. Causing a scene and revealing the existence of the awakened one to the world would result in an uproar. Jisuk informs Jiwoo that he is an awakened one, just like him. He is in the same group as Hyuk and asks him to go ahead and give him his best shot. Jiwoo thinks that In-hyuk seems to want to help Jiwoo, so Jiwoo questions Jisuk about why he wants to fight with him. Jisuk smirked and said that he wanted to have a fight with him to figure out their ranks. Jiwoo gets confused as he doesn't know about ranks, and Jisuk tells him that he didn't find out until recently that he is an awakened one. So, when a newly awakened one is discovered, sorting out ranks is necessary. And informs him that he doesn't need to look so scared as he will go easy on him. Jiwoo thinks about Jisuk's ability as he doesn't know about it. He wonders whether his ability is wind because In-hyuk said to him that Jai Young-yu, his leader, has the same ability as him. Jisuk uses his power of wind, but Jiwoo dodges it and jumps immediately. Jisuk is impressed by his speed and asks him if his awakened ability is speed related. He again uses his ability to attack Jiwoo, who in return also uses his awakened power to dodge it again and again. Jiwoo decided to gather his speed from his chest and channel it through the power of his punch, just like Mr. Caden taught him. As he is going to attack Jisuk, suddenly, Jisuk turns around and attacks him with great speed. He punched Jiwoo, who fell on the ground far away because of his punch. Jisuk tells Jiwoo that he is not the only one who can move fast, as his awakened ability is in the wind. He can also use it to move fast. He moves very fast and holds Jiwoo in his hand as if he were going to attack him. Jiwoo realized that he needed to dodge his attack, but suddenly, his leg trembled as if it had already been injured. Jiwoo said that his leg when Jisuk hurt it. He stopped immediately from punching him. Jiwoo wonders why he stopped, and Jisuk asks Jiwoo if his leg hurts. Jiwoo says yes. Jisuk, when he listens to this, concludes that he doesn't want to beat someone with an injury. As Jisuk is about to leave the place, he says to him what a let well. That's enough for today and asks him to get well soon as they will finish it when his leg is all healed. Jiwoo, alone, standing in that place, gets upset as he concludes that he is still weak. Jisuk went to In-hyuk as they both were sitting in front of each other. In-hyuk becomes angry because he knows that Jisuk has fought with Jiwoo. He asks Jisuk what he thinks as he clearly tells him not to fight with Jiwoo. But Jisuk gives the reason that Jiwoo beats up his friends, so he can't just let go of him. And this time, it is different. In-hyuk tells him that he is just using it as an excuse to fight with him, and asks him if he really thinks that In-hyuk doesn't know him. In-hyuk tells Jisuk that Jiwoo is different from him, as he was groomed since birth to live as an awakened person and trained properly, and in Jiwoo's case, his powers have been like a curse for him. In-hyuk tells Jisuk that Jiwoo has avoided people his whole life. He did not have a normal life. Jisuk asks In-hyuk if it was that bad. In-hyuk tells him that yes, it is, as while researching his background, he was surprised to discover that Jiwoo moved homes every single year. But not because people found out about his abilities, as he managed to achieve his powers and was extremely careful not to show them to anyone. That is the reason no one knew about his awakened identity. He tells him that that is the kid Jisuk chose to show off and calls Jisuk a piece of garbage. In-hyuk asks Jisuk what he is going to do if the chairwoman finds out. As she said, she won't turn a blind eye this time. Jisuk asks In-hyuk how the chairwoman will find out. There is no way of finding her out, as he also did not cause him serious harm. He asks In-hyuk to remain quiet and not tell her since they are on the subject. His sister is way too sensitive. An awakened can get into fights while going through life and asks In-hyuk, why be so strict about it? Jisuk tells In-hyuk about the chairwoman, saying that she is always so sensitive because she's chained to her chain in the office. He further says that being single at that age, locked in her office, and working all day, he doesn't understand what kind of life the chairwoman is living. As he is saying all this, In-hyuk doesn't say a single word. Jisuk asks him what he is starting at, as he cannot understand what's gotten into him. Suddenly, he hears a voice from behind. It is the chairwoman who tells Jisuk that they have not sparred in a while. Jisuk turns around and gets shocked and afraid, as this is her sister. She orders him to follow her, and Jisuk asks In-hyuk for help. To this, In-hyuk replies to him to rest in peace and bye. On the other hand, as Jiwoo is sitting in his house and feeding the hungry cat in his living area, Mr. Kaden, who is lying on the sofa, asks Jiwoo if he is all right as he doesn't seem to himself today, and asks Jiwoo the reason behind this. Jiwoo tells him that there is no specific reason for that. Mr. Kaden asks Jai to see if he is like this because he lost to some other guy. Jiwoo agreed as this was the reason he was upset. Mr. Kaden asks Jiwoo whether the guy said that it was to sort out his rank, as he must be used to picking fights with other awakened ones. Kaden thinks, how could someone who just found out about his identity win against someone like that? Mr. Kaden tells Jiwoo that it would have been stranger if he had won, but in his case, it would have been different if it had been him, of course. Jiwoo replies to Kaden still, to which Kaden inquires that he really means still. Does Kaden ask Jiwoo if he really thinks that he has become something special after only practicing a few days? If he compares himself to a normal person, he would be impressive, but again, another awakened. He is a fledgling newbie who does not know Jack. And Kaden was strong since birth. Mr. Kaden says to Jiwoo that he must be thankful that he is alive and asks him what's wrong and why he is still worried. Jiwoo tells Kaden that he doesn't like losing. Kaden says to him that he knows Jiwoo wants to be stronger, but not wanting to lose is something else. Jiwoo tells him that he is upset that he is lost again without being able to do anything. Kaden asks Jiwoo if he said the kid he was up against had the same wind ability as that In-hyuk guy who was there last week. Jiwoo tells Kaden that Jisuk used it to attack and improve his speed. Kaden asks Jiwoo if he is sure that it improved Jisuk's speed. Jiwoo tells Kaden that Jisuk's speed is like his speed, but he knew how to control his abilities, as if from experience, as there was no way for Jiwoo to win. Kaden questions Jiwoo, saying that Jisuk used the wind to attack and that his speed was like his. To which Jiwoo says yes, it was. Mr. Kaden says to him that he must be mistaken. Jiwoo asks him if he is mistaken about what. Kaden answers him by saying that he is mistaken in thinking that Jisuk's speed is like his. Jiwoo tells him that he most definitely has a speed equal to him. Kaden says that Jisuk probably had almost as much speed as him. Jiwoo asks Kaden what he means. Mr. Kaden explains to him that, like he said, he has almost as much speed as he possesses. He asks Jiwoo if he is sure he is moving at his fastest speed. He says that wasn't he trying to hold back, slowing down his speed to extend the time he could use his abilities. Jiwoo realized that Mr. Kaden was right. As he held back on using his awakened ability, he figured that he shouldn't waste it all at once. Kaden says to Jiwoo that the kid he was fighting seems to use his ability to attack and then increase his speed as the fight goes on. As Kaden doesn't know how strong the kid is, but if he is dividing his abilities like that, he will be slower than Jiwoo. Jiwoo asks Kaden what he meant. Does he mean that he is faster than Jisuk? Kaden tells him that, of course, he is faster than him, as even Kaden is impressed by his highest speed. He says to Jiwoo that he is upset that he might be faster than him when speed is his advantage. Jiwoo concludes that he is faster than Jisuk. Mr. Kaden asks him if Jisuk said he wanted to have a rematch when Jiwoo's leg is healed, as if they don't have much time left. Kaden says to him, let's see, as there are only 5 days, and it will be impossible to improve his awakened powers in such a short time. He should focus on basic combat skills and strength control. Jiwoo says to Mr. Kaden that he is going to help him, and Kaden gets a bit angry at the type of question, as it never happens that he didn't help him. Kaden tells Jiwoo to watch out, as it's going to be harder than the other training. In a loud voice, Jiwoo says yes, sir, to which Kaden gets a little scared and asks him why he is screaming like that. As Jiwoo is doing his training and Mr. Kaden is watching him from behind and instructing him, Kaden says to Jiwoo that he should not think that the training will change him overnight, as there is no way that he will become stronger in only a few days. Now, it's best to focus on his basics and effectively use his strengths. Jiwoo starts running faster, and Kaden tells him that just because he has used up all of his awakened powers, there's more he can do, and asks him to use his basic physical abilities to keep moving. The next day, in the school, those guys went to Jiwoo's class and saw he was not present again. Meanwhile, Jiwoo, who is lying on the floor and snoring, suddenly Kaden sees him and asks him who told him to sleep. Jiwoo woke up immediately. Kaden comes from behind and asks him how he can sleep at a time like this. He says to Jiwoo that he told him to use the method he taught him to gather his ability, even when he is sleeping. Jiwoo sits on the floor in a yoga position as he tries to follow Kaden's instructions, but suddenly, he again sleeps. When Kaden sees him sleeping once again, he punches Jiwoo. Jeongyu asks In-hyuk if Jiwoo has not shown up to school for a few days now. In-hyuk agrees and tells her that he has tried contacting him, but he can't reach him. He further tells him that Jiwoo hasn't been going to school since the issue with Jisuk, as In-hyuk thinks that Jiwoo is not showing up for school because the fight broke his spirit. As Miss Chairwoman is listening to In-hyuk carefully, he further tells her that even though Jisuk stopped attacking him, he has lived a different life than all of them. Jisuk's aggressiveness might have been too much for him to handle, and he must have been scared as Jai might be shunning the outside world and shivering in fear. In-hyuk asks Miss Chairwoman to please let him the permission to go and meet Jiwoo. Jisuk, who is sitting on a chair as he got hurt by Jeongyu, he is still having aches as she went hard on him. Jisuk concludes this must be the reason she is still single. Suddenly, his friends came there and told him that the kid hadn't shown up again, and asks him how hard he got. One of them asks Jisuk how badly he hit him and if he had to go to the hospital or something. They tell to Jisuk that if he keeps doing this on him, there is a possibility that he will transfer to another school. On the other hand, Jiwoo, who is lying on the floor all tired, is up. Mr. Kaden enters the room and sees Jiwoo, who is lying on the floor. He asks Jiwoo if he is already tired. Jiwoo smiles and asks Kaden if he thinks that Jiwoo is moving better now as he feels different. Mr. Kaden says to him not to get silly, as it's only been a few days. Jiwoo clenched his arm. He thought that seriously, he felt different, and it looked like his awakened powers were flowing faster than before. Kaden says that, of course, he feels different as he did not know anything before, but now he has started to learn combat skills and effectively use his abilities. So, it's bound to feel different. But Kaden informs him that he still has it. A long way to go, though, and he is still too weak. Jiwoo holds his cat in his arms and says to Kaden that he is not Mr. Kaden, so it is easy for someone like Mr. Kaden. Kaden says that it's true if everyone was like him, The world as they know it would end, as the world can't deal with Kaden. Jiwoo tells Kaden that it is so good to lie down like this. To which Kaden replies that he told him that he must work on his abilities. Jiwoo gets up and says that he will work, but before that, he needs to feed his cats as they are hungry. Jiwoo says that he can't lift a single finger, as his hands won't stop shaking. Jiwoo fills the pots of the cats with cat food and tells them to enjoy the dinner. Kaden thinks that even when he is dead tired, he never forgets to feed those cats. If he spent as much time training as he does look after cats, he would be a lot stronger right now. As Jiwoo is looking at the sample cat, suddenly, he hears the door ringing. He went to see who was at the door, and he found that it was In-hyuk. Kaden asks Jiwoo why In-hyuk came here. He also asked whether he was from the same group as the kid who picked a fight with him. Jiwoo tells Kaden that this is what that kid said, and he doesn't know anything about it, but he is here. In-hyuk apologized to Jiwoo, saying that he didn't know that Jisuk would cause him trouble. Jiwoo whispered to Kaden that In-hyuk must be here to apologize. In-hyuk tells Jiwoo that he has tried calling Jiwoo for a few days, but he couldn't reach him, so he came in person as he was worried. Jiwoo realized that his phone was off while he was training with Mr. Kaden. In-hyuk thinks that Jiwoo looks pale and exhausted and thinks that it was too traumatic that he couldn't sleep, as it is good that he came then. In-hyuk says to Jiwoo that he completely understands his actions as he said he would help him. Someone from his group picked a fight with him, and he probably felt betrayed and did not pick up In-hyuk's calls as a result. Woo corrects him by saying that he turned off his phone in case it would distract him while he was training, and he forgets about it. In-hyuk says to him that he has heard that Jisuk told Jiwoo that he is in their group. He tells him that his full name is Jisuk Yu, and he is the brother of their chairwoman. Their chairwoman is Jae Young Yu, just like her brother. As an awakened one, he is trained under the best, so he tends to do as he wants. The chairwoman punished him not too long ago, but they had no idea he would cause trouble again. He further tells him that they had nothing to do with his behavior. They have been making an apology for a while, and the chairwoman also agrees to the point that she has personally punished him, and In-hyuk assured Jiwoo that Jisuk won't be bothering him again. In-hyuk thinks that Jiwoo seems uneasy as he expected Too Furious to forgive Jisuk. He thinks that it must be it, as apologizing won't make up for his injuries. Jiwoo asks him if he can't fight that kid ever again and tells him that Jisuk asked him for a rematch once his leg is healed. In-hyuk asks Jiwoo if he means that he wants to try to fight him again. To which Jiwoo replies yes. In-hyuk concludes that Jiwoo is proud and reckless, just like a teenager, and thinks that it is better than being hurt and depressed. He says to Jiwoo that he understands what he feels, but he doesn't agree with him as it is not because he is the chairwoman's brother, but because he is strong, as his ability was recognized at an early age. He has been training ever since he tells Jiwoo that there are not many who are stronger than him at his age. He advises him not to get upset about losing him and says to him that it's better for him this way. Jiwoo says that he wants to test out how strong he really is. In-hyuk wonders if he really wants to test it out. Mr. Kaden looks at him and wonders if the kid Jiwoo is finally acting like one of them. In-hyuk understands that if it is what he wants, he will set up a chance for the two to fight. Jiwoo is happy to know this. In-hyuk asks Jiwoo to let him know when he is happy. In-hyuk wonders if he is mistaken in thinking that he is hiding from the violence of this strange and unknown world. He smiles to know that the kid is ready to live as an awakened one. It's best if he doesn't let this get to him. In-hyuk started staring at Kaden, and Jiwoo started wondering why In-hyuk was looking at Mr. Kaden like that, and wonders if he suspects something. Mr. Kaden wonders why he is looking at it. In-hyuk asks Jiwoo if he may rub his belly, that he really wants to rub his fat belly. He touches his belly and rubs it. But suddenly, the cat starts breathing heavily. Mr. Kaden becomes angry and thinks that In-hyuk wants to die. In-hyuk went to Ji-young-yu and told him what Jiwoo had told him. The chairwoman questions the kid if he really wants to fight Jisuk again. In-hyuk tells the chairwoman that even after he explains Jisuk's background to him, he will be hard-pressed to win. But Jiwoo still insists on fighting him and tells Jae Young that he wants to test his abilities. He says that he thinks that he misjudged him as Jiwoo seems to be ready to live as an awakened one. In-hyuk asks Young Yu not to worry too much, as they will take care of the fight location, and he will preside over the event. He assured Young Yu that Ji-woo wouldn't get severely hurt. Ji-young Yu instructs In-hyuk to keep an eye on him personally. Suddenly, Jisuk comes from downwards and says to In-hyuk that he has heard he met with the kid and asks about the kid from In-hyuk. In-hyuk tells him that it is going to happen in 5 days, and Jisuk asks him what he is talking about. What is going to take place in 5 days? In-hyuk tells him that Ji-woo wants to fight with him in 5 days when his leg is completely healed and asks Jisuk to get prepared. And after informing this, he went downstairs. Jisuk smirked and imagined what kind of funny kid he was. He remembered that last time he had let him off easily. He also questions whether it is the reason he gets so confident, so he wants to fight with Jisuk again. On the contrary, Ji-woo is preparing for the fight day and night. As he is practicing his abilities, Kaden instructs him not to reposition his awakened abilities, and he guides him to focus on the ability of the muscles and bones being used. Then his strength and speed will improve. While doing push-ups as his body trembles, Kaden says that it is not that easy, and Kaden says to him that if he wants to become stronger, he must do it. Ji-woo continues to have push-ups again. Suddenly, he felt a heavy weight on his back as Mr. Kaden jumped on his back. Mr. Kaden asks him to stop acting like a baby as he doesn't weigh that much. Ji-woo says that he is very heavy. Kaden asks him to shut his mouth, and instructs him to do what Kaden says as it will help him lift heavy weight. Kaden asks Ji-woo what he is doing, as his awakened abilities aren't helping his movements at all. He says that he is not using his true power to throw punches, and guides him to not lose his focus. Kaden tells him that it all must be natural, like a form of reflex. On the other hand, as Jisuk sits in the class listening to his friends, on the contrary, at night, Mr. Kaden and the other cats are sleeping. Mr. Kaden possesses energy. Suddenly, he wakes up and sees that Ji-woo is also able to gather his power in his sleep. Kaden thinks that Ji-woo has not complained once, even though he has been pushing him hard. But on the contrary, he seems to be enjoying it. Kaden wonders if Ji-woo is a masochist. Ji-woo apologizes, saying that he must have nodded off. He should have been strengthening his awakened abilities even during sleep. Kaden tells him that he was. Ji-woo wonders if he is telling the truth. Kaden tells him that it wasn't all that great, but he didn't stop in his sleep. Ji-woo becomes happy to know when Mr. Kaden sees him happy. He thinks that Ji-woo is becoming happy about something so insignificant. Ji-woo tells Mr. Kaden that he is having so much fun right now. Even though his body is aching, his powers have never felt this unrestrained. Ji-woo thanked Mr. Kaden for his training, as it's getting easier by the day. Ji-woo enjoys the fact that he is getting stronger, which is so much fun. He says to Mr. Kaden that if it wasn't for him, Mr. Kaden, he would have lived his life cowering in fear, not knowing who he was, as he would have continued living, distant from others, scared of his own powers. He thanked Mr. Kaden as he finally knew who he was. Kaden instructs him to keep up the good work then. Ji-woo, in a loud voice, says yes, sir. Suddenly, he realizes that he scared all the cats and asks them to go back to sleep. Ji-woo starts practicing again. As time passes, Ji-woo becomes more and more determined to prepare. He also strengthens his powers during sleep. Finally, the day comes when he has planned to have a fight with Jisuk. As he is leaving his home, Kaden guides him not to get nervous as it's not like he is fighting to the death. In-hyuk is presiding over the event, so nobody gets seriously hurt. Ji-woo sees a car coming out of his house. In-hyuk comes out of the car and sees that Ji-woo is already fighting, and he asks about the cat. Ji-woo tells In-hyuk that he feels too uneasy to go alone, so he is going to take the cat with him. He asks In-hyuk if he can take the cat along with him. Jisuk says to him that he can take the cat along with him as he is tame and nice. Mr. Kaden is full of anger when he hears In-hyuk say he is nice and tame. As Ji-woo comes to the place with Hyuk, he is looking here and there with wonders and acting so impressed in a place that could be unfriendly ground. Mr. Kaden says that, honestly, he did not want to come here, but still, he can't let Ji-woo come there by himself. Mr. Kaden observed some kind of energy and thought about the energy, and thinks that there is only one possible person there who could possess such strong energy, and wonders if it could be Ji-young Yu. Mr. Kaden concludes that her being one of the strongest awakened ones in Korea wasn't a rumor after all. In-hyuk knocks at Ji Young-yu's office door and tells her that he has brought Ji-woo. The chairwoman asks him to come inside. As Ji-woo went inside her office, he was surprised to see Young-yu, who was sitting on her office chair. Mr. Kaden concludes, so she is Young-yu. Suddenly, he sees Ji-woo's face, who is so surprised. Mr. Kaden wonders why the kid is acting so surprised suddenly. Ji-woo asks In-hyuk what it is. In-hyuk asks him if there is any problem. He asks In-hyuk about the chairwoman. As Ji-woo says, he expected the chairman to be someone older. Ji Young-yu stands up, comes forward to Ji-woo, and greets him nicely. She introduces herself as a Ji Young-yu, the chairwoman of Shinhwa. Ji-woo nods his head and introduces himself. He is Ji-woo CO. The chairwoman asks him if he allows her to ask him a question. She asks Ji-woo if he has changed his mind about fighting Jisuk, which Ji-woo refuses. Chairwoman tells Ji-woo that Jisuk is too strong for someone who has just come to terms with being an awakened one. She further says that he is very experienced when it comes to fighting. Ji-woo tells her that he is already aware, as Mr. In-hyuk has already explained it to him. But still, he doesn't want to quit the fight. The chairwoman guessed that he had not changed his mind yet. Ji-woo thanked her for worrying about him. But he doesn't think he is going to win against someone as strong as him. He honestly wants to defeat him, but he knows winning will be difficult, having only trained for a few days. Ji Young-yu asks him why he wants to fight with Jisuk. Ji-woo explains to her that winning or losing is not important now. Ji Young-yu asks him as he is surprised by his answer that winning is not important to him. Ji-woo explains to her that it is more important for the coward he once was to find out how well he can perform. Mr. Kaden was impressed by his impressive speech. They bring Ji-woo to the place where one's train awakened. Mr. Kaden tells him that he has already told him, as if it is only one of their training areas. Ji-woo sees the area as so big. The chairwoman asks In-hyuk about Jisuk as he is still not there. He tells Ji-young that he has not been able to reach him since this morning, and he will come as he told him a few days ago. He couldn't have forgotten the date. In-hyuk wonders why Jisuk is not here yet. Suddenly, he sees Jisuk arrive there. Jisuk apologizes to In-hyuk that he is a bit late. When he sees his sister, he wonders what she is doing here. As he comes down the stairs, he apologizes and says that he has a class in school. In-hyuk becomes angry and tells him not to kid himself as he is not the type to go to every single class, and asks him if he must be late on such an important day as today. The chairwoman and In-hyuk got angry because Jisuk didn't listen to either of them. Jisuk asks Ji-woo, as he was a no-show at school for a few days. Ji-woo tells him that he is home. Jisuk asks Ji-woo if he is doing some sort of secret training at home. Ji-woo asks him how he knows. Mr. Kaden, who is listening to all of that, asks the pathetic kid why he is answering that kind of question. Jisuk asks Ji-woo if he really thinks that he can beat him, only having trained for a few days. Mr. Kaden observes Jisuk and thinks that from the energy he feels in his body, he can tell that he is pretty strong for his age, and he can understand why Ji-woo lost him so helplessly. Jisuk turns his face around and says to In-hyuk that it's getting late, so let them start immediately. Mr. In-hyuk, in a loud voice, asks Ji-woo if he is ready and tells him that they are going to start after the third beep. Suddenly, it beeps, and after the third beep, they both start the fight. Mr. Kaden instructs Ji-woo not to get afraid. Ji-woo thinks in his mind that it was only for a few days, but as he trained hard with Mr. Kaden, so he says to himself just to do his best. As Jisuk is standing far away from Ji-woo as he uses his powers, he comes close to Ji-woo and attacks him. He smacks the face of Ji-woo, and with a sound of bang, Ji-woo falls on the floor far away. Jisuk asks Ji-woo if it is all even after all the training. After attacking Ji-woo, Jisuk went towards the chairwoman and In-hyuk and told them that it was too easy for him after he made the time to come. In-hyuk sees Ji-woo lying on the ground and thinks that he struck out completely, as he must not have expected an attack as soon as the fight started. In actuality, Jisuk did not put a lot of strength into the attack, but it was still a big blow to Ji-woo. Jisuk smirks and says that it is very unfortunate as both made the time to come and watch, and says that it is so unlike the sister to make time to see a fight against some newbie kid. As his sister sees Ji-woo, he wonders why she is looking at him continuously. He turns his face around and sees that Ji-woo is trying to stand up after being too hurt. Jisuk concludes that Jiwoo's stamina must be greater than he predicted. Mr. Kaden passes a smile when he sees Jiwoo standing up to fight again. Mr. Kaden realizes that Jiwoo lost focus and got hit, but lessens the damage by channeling his powers to the area where the impact occurred. Jisuk questions Jiwoo, saying that he thought his attack hurt him badly, and questions him if he was wrong about the attack. Jiwoo thinks that he got distracted like a fool, as he did not think that Jisuk would attack at the third beep. Jisuk concludes that the kid is annoying. Jiwoo decides to attack him first. This time, Jiwoo gathers his power and tries to attack him. He punches Jisuk, but he dodges his attack. Then he punches him again. Jisuk dodges the attack once more. Jisuk abuses Jiwoo and attacks him in his face, but Jiwoo also dodges his attacks. Jiwoo attacks Jisuk straight on his belly with full power. As In-hyuk and Jeongyu are watching the fight, they both are surprised. In-hyuk is impressed with Jiwoo's moves, as his moves are so fluid, and says that his awakened ability is speed, and his moves are beyond impressive. Jisuk becomes angry, and he says to Jiwoo that all he has is speed and abuses him. He attacks Jiwoo, and Jiwoo defends himself. Jisuk continuously attacks him one by one. He hit Jiwoo so hard through his attacks. Jisuk tells him that he told him before he could match Jiwoo's speed. In-hyuk tells Jeongyu that Jisuk is increasing his speed. His moves are as impressive as ever, and he has completely adjusted to Jiwoo's speed. Jiwoo realized that Jisuk had increased his speed just like before. He recalls what Mr. Kaden told him before about Jisuk, that he was just catching up to his speed, and Jiwoo's fastest speed was even impressive to Kaden. As Jisuk tries to attack Jiwoo, Jiwoo increases his speed, making it impossible for Jisuk to attack him. Kaden realizes that Jisuk is strong for his age, but that is not enough to match Jiwoo at his best. Jisuk tries to attack Jiwoo through his leg, but Jiwoo dodges his attack, and in return, he attacks Jisuk, which he cannot dodge. Jisuk is confused, and they wondered if Jiwoo was faster than him by abusing him. Jiwoo realizes that he is doing exactly the same as Mr. Kaden said to him. Mr. Kaden also realizes that Jiwoo is doing great in the actual fight, though he thought that Jiwoo would freeze in the actual fight. In-hyuk says to Jeongyu that he never thought that he would be this good. Jiwoo's moves are amazing, and it's a shame that he is up against Jisuk because it won't be enough to knock Jisuk out. Jiwoo once again attacked him with his full power. Jisuk becomes angry and abuses him, saying that he is done playing with him. Jisuk attacks Jiwoo so violently that even his shirt gets torn, and he falls to the ground. Jisuk says that he takes it easy on Jiwoo and takes him for a pushover. In-hyuk feels that Jisuk is overdoing it, whereas Mr. Kaden also realizes that in this way, Jiwoo could get seriously hurt. As Jisuk is going to punch Jiwoo, he compliments him, saying that he has improved since before, but he still has a long way to go before he can match up with Jisuk. He warns him that he can make sure that he doesn't ever challenge Jisuk again. Jiwoo goes backward to dodge his attack. Jisuk asks Jiwoo if he is going to keep running away. He punches Jiwoo hard. Jiwoo sits there holding himself and realizes that even though he used his abilities to defend himself, his body feels like it's shattered. Jisuk gathers winds in his hand and asks Jiwoo how he is still moving. Jisuk asks Jiwoo to try blocking this. In-hyuk stopped Jisuk from attacking Jiwoo that hard, but he attacks Jiwoo with a great blast. In-hyuk thinks that it is serious, that Jiwoo's moves were better than he expected, and that Jisuk's recent good behavior distracted him. He asks Jisuk to go easy with Jiwoo, to which Jisuk says that he did nothing as Jiwoo had started it first. He further says to In-hyuk that this is his fault and that his sister Jeong's fault, so why should he be the one who takes it easy? In-hyuk tells Jisuk that Jiwoo is right. Jisuk looks back at Jiwoo, who is shaking while standing, and says to him that it is not over. Jisuk wonders how he can still get up. Mr. Kaden realizes that, of course, it wasn't a direct hit, as Jiwoo knows where the attacks would make the smallest impact. So, he positioned himself perfectly to absorb the attack there. He was also able to protect his body by focusing his abilities all on a fraction of a second. Mr. Kaden smirks. In-hyuk asks Jiwoo if he will be okay, on which Jiwoo tells him that he can still fight. The power behind the Jisuk attack just was intense, but Jiwoo seems to be okay despite being hit by that attack. He realizes that there must be more to it than his body being in good shape. He wonders if he did something by chance to reduce the impact. or if he defended himself. In-hyuk clenched his fingers even though he wanted to test Jiwoo's powers. Jisuk wonders who the kid is, as the attack should have put him on the floor, and wonders if his powers allow him to defend himself in addition to increasing his speed. He realized that Jiwoo was better than he thought, but that's about it. As he can put up with that, then he just must attack him harder. In-hyuk realized that Jisuk had increased his energy, and he also wanted to see how Jiwoo performed, but he thought that if they continued, Jiwoo might get hurt badly. In-hyuk announced that it would be too dangerous to continue, and that would be all for today. No wonder both came to see the fight. They were trying to protect that kid. Jiwoo says to him that if it's because of Jiwoo, he can continue. In-hyuk appreciates Jiwoo as he has done well, and he has surprised him. He further tells Jiwoo that he is way better awakened than he expected. However, if he continues, he will be hurt severely. He informs Jiwoo that Jisuk has not even used his power to its full potential yet, and warns him that if Jisuk uses his power to its full potential, Jiwoo will be severely hurt. Jiwoo is surprised to know that the power he has been using recently is still not Jisuk's full potential. Mr. Kaden, who is listening to all this, also comes to know that Jisuk has not used all of his powers yet. Kaden wonders what Jai Woo-seo will do now. He is not sure that Jai Woo-seo will give up or fight more, but Jiwoo decides to continue the fight. Mr. Kaden, In-hyuk, and Jisuk were all surprised to learn that Jiwoo still wanted to fight. Jiwoo tells Jisuk that he is okay, and he wants to fight till the end. By seeing Jiwoo's devotion and passion towards it, Jisuk thinks that he starts liking the kid. Jisuk asks In-hyuk to let Jiwoo fight as he is begging to fight and wants to keep going. He can learn from this opportunity and get to know his own limits. In-hyuk stops Jisuk, but meanwhile, Jiwoo requests him not to stop them from having a fight. The chairwoman orders In-hyuk to let Jiwoo do what he wants. He tells In-hyuk that Jiwoo will do better than he thinks. In-hyuk thinks that even the chairwoman feels this way and wonders if there is really something special about Jiwoo. So, in that case, he announces that then they will continue. When Jiwoo tries to punch him in the face, Jisuk wonders if Jiwoo is using the same strategy he did in the beginning. On the other hand, Jiwoo also thinks that he is at a disadvantage if there's a distance between them. When Jisuk sees Jiwoo thinking something, he wonders if Jiwoo has realized it yet. He thinks that there is the possibility that he can learn something from the fight as well. As Jisuk is going to punch Jiwoo in the face, suddenly, Jiwoo defends himself and attacks Jisuk. In return, with a booming sound, Jisuk gets far away from Jiwoo. Jisuk says to Jiwoo that his speed is impressive, but there's a limit to your strength as his attacks need to contact Jisuk, and all he must do is not let Jiwoo come near him. As Jiwoo tries to come near Jisuk through his awakened power of speed, he observes something stopping him. He wonders what this is as it seems like a wall. Jisuk tells Jiwoo that he uses wind to build a wall, as when he has absolute control of his awakened abilities, tricks like this are child's play. He tells Jiwoo that there is a difference between them and that he cannot beat Jisuk. Mr. Kaden realizes that Jisuk has a lot of fighting experience as he figures out Jiwoo's attack pattern, so he is not in a rush as his abilities are much stronger. In-hyuk observes that Jisuk at first lost his focus due to Jiwoo's unexpected moves, but over time, Jisuk adapted to them well, and says that it looks like the fight will get harder for Jiwoo as their skill levels are too different. Jisuk uses his wind power and crashes all that wind towards Jiwoo. With a bang, Jiwoo falls on the ground too hard. His body gets severely injured. In-hyuk screams at Jisuk, to which Jisuk says that the kid himself wanted to fight with him. So how is it his fault again? He further says that if In-hyuk continues interrupting, does he think he will survive if he meets an aggressive, awakened one? And it's better to learn now than die while fighting someone unprepared. Mr. Kaden realizes that Jisuk made his wind explode before Jiwoo could react to it, as it wasn't because Jiwoo lost focus while fighting. Jiwoo, who lacks experience with others, awakened and wouldn't be able to block that. The chairwoman instructs In-hyuk to take Jiwoo to the treatment center. But suddenly, they all get shocked to see Jiwoo, who tries to stand up again while getting severely injured, and he says that he can still fight. In-hyuk asks Jiwoo to stop, saying that's enough. Even Jisuk says to him that if he keeps this up, he will really get hurt. As Jiwoo stands up, his body is shivering and shaking. In-hyuk thinks that the wounds on the outside of his body are probably nothing compared to his inside right now and wonders how Jiwoo is even standing. He tells Jiwoo that he understands how Jiwoo is feeling, but he can't let the fight continue as it is his final decision. Jiwoo thanked him for worrying about him, but he tells him that he can take care of himself and that he is going to fight till the end. In-hyuk, Ji-young-yu, and Mr. Kaden all get answerless. Mr. Kaden calls Jiwoo Seo. As Jiwoo is walking on the side of the road, he sees a cat at the center of the road. Jiwoo starts staring at the cat and thinks about what he should do with the cat as it could get hit by a car. Meanwhile, he sees a truck coming towards the cat. He gets shocked and runs towards the cat to save the cat. He immediately holds the cat and saves him from the truck. He gets happy when he saves the cat and asks the cat if he is okay. And what is he doing on the road as it is dangerous because he can get hit by any vehicle. Suddenly, Jiwoo hears the whispers of the surrounding people, who are muttering about the speed at which he saved the cat and disappeared. One of the persons tells the other one that he saw a boy who disappeared with the cat that was on the road. He saw a cat on the road, but a kid appeared out of nowhere and then disappeared with the cat. But the other person didn't believe him, so he said that he was serious and requested that he believe in him. When Jiwoo Seo listens to them, he runs in a hurry toward his home. He sits in a corner and realizes that he got caught using his own powers, and wonders what if other people saw him while crying, thinking that he might be going to be taken away. At the same time, his mom calls his name and asks him to unlock his door. He apologizes to his mom while he is shivering. Jiwoo recalls the incident during the fight and realizes that it is difficult to stand for him as his skin stings and hurts like it's been cut with a knife. He feels like his body has been hit by a car. Mr. Kaden, In-hyuk, and the chairwoman look at Jiwoo. In-hyuk tells Jiwoo that it is still not late, but Jiwoo doesn't want to quit his game. In-hyuk wonders what Jiwoo is trying to prove, but is fighting as he is still not giving up. Jisuk also thinks that what Jiwoo wants. Why would he risk his life for something like a fight? He concludes that he cannot help it as Jiwoo is getting so stubborn. Jisuk starts channeling his power and tells Jiwoo that he cannot waste any of his time finishing him, as it is all that he can do to help him. Jiwoo realizes that Jisuk is getting stronger than before. He has so much power and thinks about how he can be so powerful as he is the same age as Jiwoo. Jisuk addresses Jiwoo Seo and tells him that he doesn't want to torture him, so he will end it with his attack. Jiwoo gets scared, but he does not show him as he thinks that if it hurts this bad, how much is it going to hurt him with a stronger attack? Jiwoo remembers the time when he asked Mr. Kaden about any possibility of his winning. Mr. Kaden told him that he had not seen Jisuk with his own eyes, but by listening to Jiwoo, he could tell that Jiwoo wouldn't be able to beat him in his current state. As that guy's been training since he was a little kid, Jiwoo can't compare with him, as he had just started training a few days ago. Jiwoo asks Kaden if there is really no way to win, and Kaden tells him that there is one way. Jiwoo asks Kaden what the way is. Kaden told Jiwoo that the kid probably thinks of him as an easy competition, so he needs to use that. Kaden instructed Jiwoo not to use all his awakened abilities and ration them while he was fighting. Kaden also guided him in storing his energy, even if it was critical. He further explained to him that as time passes, his opponent will get used to his moves and react accordingly, and that's when Jiwoo will get his chance. Mr. Kaden told him that when the time came, he should use all his energy on that one attack and bet everything on it. It might be 0.1 second, or it might be even less than that. Mr. Kaden told Jiwoo that the only way he can win is to rely on the outcome of that instant. After remembering the advice of Mr. Kaden, Jiwoo gets geared up to fight. As Jisuk is about to attack heavily, Mr. Kaden thinks that it is now or never for Jiwoo. Jiwoo decides to dodge Jisuk's attack and decides that he doesn't have to hide it anymore. Mr. Kaden tells him that he is an awakened one and that there is nothing to be ashamed of. Asks Jisuk to attack him with his full power. Jiwoo also uses his full power to dodge the attack. He comes close to Jisuk and attacks him, reminding him that he had to put all his power into one attack and blast him away. As he attacks Jiwoo with a blasting sound, Jisuk falls far away and gets hit by the wall, whereas Jiwoo also falls to the ground. In-hyuk asks Ji-young-yu if he missed Jiwoo's attack because it happened so suddenly and asks if Jiwoo is that fast. Mr. Kaden goes near Jiwoo and taps him. Jiwoo opens his eyes and sees Mr. Kaden. Mr. Kaden appreciates Jiwoo as he did well. Jiwoo asks Mr. Kaden why he keeps calling him and further thanked him. In-hyuk runs towards Jiwoo to see if he is okay. On the contrary, Jisuk is also thinking that it is crazy as he really got screwed over by that kid. He wondered why he kept it hidden all the time and decided that he wouldn't fall for that anymore if Jiwoo had the ability to move like that. Ji-young-yu comes to Jisuk and tells him that it's enough as she tells him that neither he nor Jiwoo can continue anymore. Jisuk tells her that he can continue the fight, and In-hyuk tells them that Jiwoo can't move anymore. Ji-young says to Jisuk that he must have learned a lot from the fight and that he also appreciates him for doing well. Ji-young then goes to Jiwoo and tells him that his perseverance is worthy of respect. Jiwoo thanked her, too, for bearing with his stubbornness. Ji-young tells Jiwoo that it was a good experience for Jisuk, too. Jiwoo speaks to Jisuk as he says thanks to him for the fight. Jisuk stops Jiwoo from getting ridiculous, and he thanks him just after he gets himself beaten up. But Jiwoo tells him that he really is thankful. Jisuk turns his face around and asks Jiwoo to stop smiling. In-hyuk tells Ji-young-yu that he had no idea that Jiwoo could move as fast as his last move, especially since he was so fast at last that he couldn't even follow him. As she can't say that he overpowered Jisuk, but considering he has only realized his awakened abilities. In-hyuk further says that he thinks Jiwoo is genuinely gifted. Ji-young, who is sitting in her chair, remembers the last attack on Jiwoo. Suddenly, In-hyuk sees the chairwoman thinking about something. He calls the chairwoman, and she asks In-hyuk about Jiwoo's condition. In-hyuk tells her that Jiwoo should be awake about now. Ji-young-yu stands up. On the other hand, Jiwoo, who is lying on the hospital bed, thinks that he has lost again. But he is not mad and frustrated like last time. Instead, he feels peaceful. He calls Mr. Kaden and tells him that he feels like he is a really awakened one. To which Mr. Kaden tells him that he was always awakened. Jiwoo tells Mr. Kaden that it hurts so much that he can't move. He suddenly thinks that he should be training his abilities instead of spending his time like this. He starts gathering his powers during sleep. Mr. Kaden tells him that he has to nag Jiwoo as he is training without him. Suddenly, Mr. Kaden hears a voice from outside, stops Jiwoo, and informs him that someone is coming. In-hyuk slides the door and tells Jiwoo that he knows he is awake. He tells Jiwoo that he has been asleep for 2 days. Jiwoo gets a little surprised to know that he has been sleeping for 2 days. In-hyuk asks Jiwoo about his condition. Jiwoo tells them that it hurts a lot, and he can't even move. In-hyuk informs Jiwoo that he has fractured 5 ribs and 4 more have cracks in them, and on top of that, he has bruises and abrasions all over his body. Mr. Kaden thinks that it is nothing, and that there is no need for Jiwoo to worry too much. In-hyuk tells Jiwoo that it's a serious condition for an average person, but since he is awakened, he will recover in no time as they are doing their best to bring him back to health. He will be back to his usual self in no time. Jiwoo thanked In-hyuk. In-hyuk tells him that he can put his mind at ease and focus on getting normal. When he saw Kaden, he desired to touch that round and chubby, wobbly body, but then he realized to hold it in. Kaden gets confused as he cannot understand what Hyuk is up to. Ji-young-yu asks Jiwoo if he has heard the name Kaden. All of them are surprised. In-hyuk wonders why the chairwoman is asking such a question. Mr. Kaden wonders if she feels the energy that Jiwoo used at the end was related to Mr. Kaden. But then he thinks that no one would notice because it was such a small amount. Mr. Kaden realizes that Ji-young-yu is a lot more sensitive than he thought. Jiwoo asks Young-yu about Kaden, but he doesn't know who Mr. Kaden is. Ji-young asks Jiwoo if he really doesn't know who Kaden is. Jiwoo tells her that it is a name that he has never heard before. Ji-young-yu then asks Jiwoo the name of his cat. Mr. Kaden wonders if that woman suspects that he is Kaden. Jiwoo unintentionally says to her that his name is Ka, and Ji-young-yu asks Ka what? Jiwoo realizes immediately that it is close as he almost says, Mr. Kaden. He tells them that his name is casein nitrate. Mr. Kaden is shocked by the name, whereas Jiwoo also wonders what he said in a hurry. Ji-young-yu says that his cat's name is unique, and he always stays by his side, unlike other cats. In-hyuk asks the chairwoman why she is saying such things and asks her if there is a problem with a cat staying by its owner's side. He tells her that there are many cats that follow their owners, unlike many cats, and that it is a hopeful dream for cat lovers. He further says that, in his opinion, even the ones that are cold to their owners are super adorable. On the other hand, there are also cats who want to approach their owners but only stare from a distance. He explains that cats have many different personalities, and words are not enough to describe them all. That is what attracts them. On the contrary, as Woo-in is walking towards his classroom, he recalls the time when he was released as a man tells him that, taking into consideration all the circumstances, they have decided to let him go for now, but he is not allowed to leave his neighborhood, and he will be under observation. Woo-in asks him what will happen to the professor, and he tells Woo-in that he will have to face the consequences of breaking the rules. He slides open the door of the classroom and sits on his chair. He sees that Ji-woo is not present. He wonders if, as it is the third period, Ji-woo should be here, but he is not, so he wonders what has happened to him. He asks his classmate if he has seen Ji-woo, and his classmate tells him that Ji-woo has been absent from school for a few days. Woo-in asked him if he really had been absent from school in his class. The fellow tells him that he had been absent from school when Woo-in also stopped coming to school, as the last time Ji-woo came to school, some senior came to look for him and Woo-in. Woo-in gets a little surprised to know, as Jisuk is sitting while the place where Ji-woo attacked is still painting. As he is getting annoyed from thinking about the time when Ji-woo fought with him, Jisuk decides that he wants a rematch when Ji-woo gets better. Suddenly, his friends came and asked him what he was doing there. One of them asked about their reason for not coming to school, while one of them asked Jisuk about what was wrong with his face. Jisuk tells them that he took care of a few things. One of them asks him what things he cared for and what things did to his face, on which Disc gives them a shut-up call. One of the boys tells Jisuk that he has been calling him because he wants to talk to him. The other one informs him that he has been quiet these days, so some boys from other schools are acting up. So, he thinks that a visit is long overdue. Jisuk stands up, and as he is about to go, he tells them that he is not interested in that. If they want to do something, they can for sure go from there. One of the boys wonders what is going on with his behavior as he is acting so differently. One of them asks the other where they want to hang out, and the other asks them to go to PC Bang. Three of them suddenly see Woo-in. They smirked and said that he had shown it to school after a long time. Ji Young-yu tells In Hyuk that in Ji-woo's final move against Jisuk, his attack seemed to have some traces of electrical abilities. In Hyuk becomes shocked to hear this and asks Ji Young if she is sure that Ji-woo has electrical capabilities and fast speed, as if it is like she says it means Ji-woo don't have one kind of ability, he in fact has two types of abilities. As this is basically impossible for Ji-woo without proper training, he wonders how it is possible for him as he has just recently realized that he is an awakened one. Ji Young-yu clears him that she is not mistaken as she has seen it with her two eyes. In Hyuk says that if he thinks about it but suddenly remembers something, he apologizes to the chairwoman and tells her that he will report him as soon as he gets back, and he leaves the office after saying this. In the Shin HWA Total Medical Care, where Ji-woo is admitted as Ji-woo is on bed rest, Mr. Caden asks Ji-woo about the name that he gave him. Ji-woo says he is sorry as he couldn't think of a name starting with Ka phonetically. Mr. Caden asks him what the name means, but Ji-woo doesn't know the meaning as he has just heard it somewhere. Mr. Caden realizes that Ji-woo named him after a word that he didn't know the meaning of. Ji-woo says to him that he can't help it. Ji-woo asks Mr. Caden, who is sitting on his bed, the reason why the chairwoman asked about Caden's relationship with Ji-woo. Mr. Caden tells him that it's probably because of the attack Ji-woo used at the end to knock his opponent down as it was very weak, but it had traces of electricity in it. Ji-woo is amazed by knowing this, as the chairwoman was able to guess a connection to Caden based on that. Caden answers him while licking his paws, saying that he doesn't think she can prove it as the amount he used in his attack was too weak to tell. But all that shows how capable Young-yu really are in making the connection with Caden. Caden wonders why he is licking his paws. He then stands up and jumps on Ji-woo's bed. He informs Ji-woo that someone is approaching them at a great speed as they are not running. They are using their ability to approach them at an extreme speed. Suddenly, In Hyuk slides open the door of the room. Ji-woo asks him why he came back, and In Hyuk tells him that he came back to check something. As he is looking at Mr. Caden, Ji-woo thinks the reason for him looking at Mr. Caden that way. In Hayek gives Mr. Caden a box full of snacks and toys for Caden and tells him that he forgot to leave the box for the cat and tells Jiwoo that it is a gift from him to Casino Nitrate. He bought several things since he doesn't know what he should like. As Mr. Caden doesn't like the name given to him, which is Canine Nitrate, he makes an ugly face by listening to the name. In Hayek tells them as he is leaving for his way. He tells them that he was in the middle of an important conversation with the chairwoman. He bid farewell and left. In Hayek goes to the chairwoman and apologizes to her. He tells her that he has forgotten to give the gifts to Casino Nitrate. The chairwoman is surprised and asks him whether he has said gifts. He agreed and asked their reason for looking at him that way. On the other hand, as Jisuk is walking, he concludes that it is so annoying as his sides keep paining. Suddenly, he sees the guys coming towards him. Jisuk asks them to stop and tells them that he is not interested so they can go and do it on their own. Jisuk turns his face around and changes his path. As he is about to go, one of the boys asks him where he is going. Jisuk questions himself as if he is neglecting those guys, but then he thinks that there's no big deal as they are getting on him. On the contrary, after some time, the boys went to Wooin and asked him if, when he started school again, they had been waiting for him for a long time, and he had made them wait so long. One of them tells him that it is not good to be absent for so long. He pats Wooin and tells him in sarcasm that they missed him so much. They tell him that they are not in a good mood, so it is good that they met Wooin. One of them punches Wooin in his face. Wooin also attacks him in return and asks him what he did with Jiwoo. One of them came forward to attack Wooin, but he defended himself and made an attack on him so that he fell to the ground. Then Wooin moves towards the third boy, who begs Wooin to stop and tells him that Jisuk is the one who took his friend. He tells him that since then, Jiwoo hasn't come back to school, and he informs him that they don't know what happened to Jiwoo. He further tells him that Jisuk took Jiwoo somewhere to teach him a lesson. He explains to himself that they had nothing to do with his friend. The last time he saw Jiwoo was when Jisuk took him somewhere. He tells Wooin that even when he kicked Jiwoo's injured leg, he kept calm. Then he lunged at him when he said that he would go bother Wooin too. He asks Wooin if he should call Jisuk too, as he was there a few moments ago. Wooin thinks that there is no way an awakened one like Jiwoo would lose to them, and thinks that those guys would never have been able to lay a hand on Jiwoo, and thinks if there's a possibility as he was injured by the professor. Wooin hears a voice from behind as someone questions them about what is going on here. He turned around and saw someone standing. Jisuk asks Wooin if he is the same kid as last time and asks if he has done them to his friends. Wooin asks him if he is Jisuk. Jisuk abuses him and tells him to answer Jisuk's question first. Wooin again asks Jisuk if he is Jisuk. Jisuk thinks that he is a funny guy and tells him that he is Jisukyu. As Mr. Caden and Jiwoo are resting, suddenly, Jiwoo wakes up and realizes that he forgot to feed the 3 kittens. As he has been asleep for several days, the kitten must be starving, and he questions Mr. Caden. What if those kittens starved while waiting for Jiwoo? Mr. Caden informs him that Mr. Inhyuk goes to his house every day and feeds the kittens while he is in the hospital. He tells him that both he and Mr. Inhyuk are weird as both are nuts about the cat. Meanwhile, there is a fight between Wooin and Jisuk. As Jisuk attacked him, he realized that Wooin was fast. Wooin also attacked him back as the attack hit him. He realized that Wooin had been pretending to be a nerd before, as he thought that he was a weakling. Wooin asks Jisuk about Jiwoo. He tells Wooin that Jiwoo checked into the hospital a few days ago. Wooin becomes angry and asks if Jisuk has done something to Jiwoo, so he is admitted to the hospital. He asks Wooin how he could say this, as things didn't turn out the way he wanted. Wooin once again attacks Jisuk. As a result, he defends himself and attacks back on Wooin, but Wooin blocks his attack. Jisuk kicks Wooin, but he successfully defends himself from the attack. He realizes that Wooin has good reflexes. Even though he hasn't used his abilities, it is hard for normal people to react at that speed. Wooin realizes that Jisukyu is not an average boy. Jisuk thinks he should play around Wooin a little. He punches him, but Wooin blocks his upper body to defend himself from the attack. He sees this and abruptly punches him on his belly and tells him that he will block his upper body that way. His lower half will be wide open. He attacks Wooin and asks him how the attack is caused by abusing him. Wooin again blocked the attack of Jisuk, who realizes it. Wooin attacks him right at the point where he gets hurt. He gets more aggressive and attacks Wooin more violently. Wooin thinks that he can't understand who he is, as the attack Wooin made on him would have knocked him out. But he is too powerful and extremely fast. Jisuk asks Wooin if he really thinks that he can play around him, as he is taking him easy on. To which Wooin replies that this is exactly what he wants to say. As they were fighting, suddenly Mr. Park came and asked both to stop fighting. Mr. Park asks Wooin how he can make a scene when he has just let him go, and tells him that this isn't beneficial to him at all. Jisuk wonders if the committee let him go. Jisuk asks Wooin if he is an awakened one. Wooin says to him that he is also awakened one. He tells him that this is the reason Wooin's moves and speed are out of the ordinary. He says Wooin to have a face-off properly. He starts channeling his powers. Mr. Park tells Jisuk, as he knows the chairwoman would never approve of such a commotion. If using his powers attracted civilian attention, the chairwoman would never stand for that. Wooin realizes that Jisuk's awakened power is the wind and wonders if he put Jiwoo in the hospital with the ability. Wooin tells Jisuk that he is not the only one who thinks it's good news, as he won't need to hold back any longer. Mr. Park asks Wooin what he is doing, as it seems like he has forgotten that he has been monitored by the committee. Wooin tells him that he remembers Jisuk. When he hears this, he tells Wooin that he likes his attitude. Mr. Park realizes that this is a problem, as Jisuk is well known for being troublesome, but he doesn't count on Wooin being so rebellious. Suddenly, Mr. In-hyuk comes to the scene and asks them what is going on there. He asks Jisuk what he has done now. Jisuk asks In-hyuk why he always thinks that he is the one who starts everything, and tells him that the kid Wooin came at him first. In-hyuk asks him to forget it, as they will talk about it later, as that is not important. In-hyuk asks Mr. Park the reason behind the committee around their territory without giving advance notice again, and asks him if the last issue has not been resolved. Mr. Parks tells him that he doesn't need to know. In-hyuk tells him that Mr. Park has a funny way of saying things and reminds him that he should not forget whose territory this is. Mr. Parks replies to him that he understands the territory belongs to Jae-young and tells In-hyuk that he should be aware by himself that no one can interfere with the committee's actions. In-hyuk tells Mr. Park that the excuse does not give the committee the right to run unchecked in someone else's territory, and tells him that if he wanted to, he should have asked for their corporation first, as they should follow at least the basic manners. Wooin asks In-hyuk about any other way in which he can fight with Jisuk. The problem is that someone can see them fighting, so he asks if they could have a fight at some place where there are no people around, as Wooin has unfinished business with Jisuk. Jisuk speaks to In-hyuk and says that he has told him before, as he is not the one who started the fight. In-hyuk thinks about the reason why the kids are so reckless these days and asks Mr. Park about his opinion on the matter, on which he suggests that he could use his facilities. On the other hand, Mr. Kaden and Jiwoo both are sleeping in the hospital room. They both come to the place where they are going to have a fight. In-hyuk apologizes to the chairwoman, Miss Jaeyoung, for the inconvenience. She asks them to explain the situation to her. As Mr. Park is going to explain to her, suddenly, In-hyuk interrupts and says that he will explain it to her himself. He explains to her that the committee member wanted to battle Jisuk and that it is better to battle indoors. So, they decided to bring them here. Mr. Park corrects In-hyuk by telling him that Wooin is not one of them. He is merely under their management. Mr. In-hyuk tells him that it is almost the same thing, and as he mentioned so, he should have managed him better, and he suggests that Mr. Park take some responsibility. Mr. Park suggests that In-hyuk take care of his members, as he thinks that there is a great chance that Wooin was provoked by Jisuk first. In-hyuk becomes aggressive and asks how to dare he talk like that while standing in their territory. He asks him if he wants to have a goon, which Mr. Park says he has no problem with. The chairwoman asks both to stop. 3 of them see Wooin and Jisuk, who are about to start a fight, as both gather their power to attack one another. Jisuk tells Wooin that he is in serious trouble. Wooin attacks Jisuk, as he is not expecting Wooin to be so fast that he attacks him so suddenly. Wooin asks Jisuk if he wants to fight, or if he wants to have a talk. Jisuk says him to shut his mouth. Wooin attacks Jisuk. He realizes that it is difficult to guess the direction of Wooin attacks. Jisuk also attacks Wooin, but Wooin successfully dodges the attack. In-hyuk, who sees all this, concludes that Wooin is strong as he is holding his own up against Jisuk. In-hyuk wonders if telekinesis is his awakened ability and wonders if Wooin has learned Professor Deline's unique style. As he observes Wooin's attacks, he realizes that Wooin is drawing power from his surroundings, compressing it, and then exploding the powers in his attack. In this way, it becomes difficult to read the moves if he is used to merely throwing his attacks. As the fight goes on, In-hyuk thinks that it's going to be hard to battle for Jisuk, as Wooin is completely replicating Professor Deline's style. He speaks to Mr. Park and asks him how he managed to catch Professor Deline. But Mr. Park didn't reply to him, nor did he give any answer to him. In-hyuk says to him that it's fine if he doesn't want to answer him. Wooin attacks Jisuk straight on his face. Jisuk is unable to dodge his attack. He also, in return, attacks Wooin, but Wooin succeeds in dodging his attack. Jisuk realizes that it is too hard for him to dodge Wooin's attacks, as he is sure that his attacks are more powerful than those of Wooin. Jisuk immediately speeds up himself as he is going to attack Wooin at a greater speed. He suddenly comes near to Wooin and attacks him, but he blocks his attacks and succeeds in defending himself. He attacks in return, and Jisuk tells him that he is too slow. Suddenly, Jisuk kicks Wooin, who falls to the ground far away. Wooin again attacks him and punches him in his face so hard that his glasses fall apart and crash. Jisuk tells him that they are not on the same ranks and asks him if he knows who he is fighting with. He rises and uses his awakened power on Jisuk. Jisuk wonders why his neck is frozen and why he is unable to move it. He also wonders if Wooin is using one of his abilities. Wooin thinks to attack Jisuk one last time. With a banging sound, Jisuk fell far away. He holds his head, asks Wooin what he did, and abuses him. In-hyuk concludes that Wooin is really something as he uses telekinesis to grab Jisuk's throat. Mr. Park gets impressed through Wooin as he didn't expect him to use his powers so well. Mr. Park remembers the time when he advised Professor Deline to speak as there is no use in keeping quiet, as he told him that he has enough evidence that he has violated the rules of the Awakened Ones. But Professor Deline still utters not a single word from his mouth as Mr. Park is about to leave the room. He tells Professor Deline that his student will have to face the punishment as well, even if he had betrayed him, but together, they both have broken too many rules. Suddenly Professor Deline said that the kid is Wooin. Mr. Park realized that Professor Deline is finally reacting to something after not talking for days. Professor Deline requested that Mr. Park have the committee look after him. He replied that it is difficult as he is not one of the committee members, and he is his student. After all, Professor Deline says to him that he is not asking for too much, but just don't let him live by himself and tell him that he will cooperate with Mr. Park if he promises to do what Professor Deline told him, as the committee wants something from him too. Mr. Park, after seeing Wooing powers, wonders if he is this powerful. The people were impressed as they knew that he was only 11 and passed level 3 on the test that even adults find difficult to pass. One of them tells them that he is young, your younger brother, which is very impressive because, at this rate, he is probably the top ranked in his country, if not in the whole world. One of them says that it is very lucky for their country that their country has birthed another powerful awakened being. But also, at the same time, it is a bit of a letdown that he, along with Jai Youngyu, is a part of the Shinhwa group. When Jisuk realizes that he is almost lost to Wooin, he becomes aggressive, as he can't believe how that man could do this to him. He stands up and starts gathering up his awakened power. When Wooin sees this, he realizes that he didn't know that Jisukyu was that powerful. Mr. In-hyuk thinks that Jisuk must be furious as, unlike the fight with Jiwoo, where he got caught off guard, it is the first time he has fought with someone his own age and almost lost. Mr. Park concludes that Jisuk is so young, but so powerful as he thought before that people exaggerated Jisuk's abilities, but he was wrong. Jisuk says to Wooin that at the time, he knows that he is not a weak fledgling, so from now, he will fight properly against him. Wooin attacks Jisuk, but his attack could do anything to him. He abuses Wooin, and Wooin is surprised to know that his attack could not do anything against him. He then sees carefully as Jisuk is using wind to protect himself from his attacks. Jisuk asks Wooin why he is surprised. He thinks about why his attacks do not harm him. He tells Wooin that his attacks are deadly, but they are block-able. So, all he can do to protect himself is to stop him from closing their distance. He attacks Wooin violently by directing all the wind toward him. His attack even caused cracks in the wall. Blood started dripping from his body. Jisuk smirked and asked him if his attack wasn't that bad. Wooin again uses his telekinesis ability and freezes his neck, which he thinks he was talking about, and he again held his neck. He says to him that he really is consistent with his attacks. He gathers all his powers and makes a powerful attack on Wooin, who tries to defend himself by blocking his attack. But the attack was so powerful that he could not resist the attack. He falls to the ground and gets severe injuries. Jisuk asks him if he knows his place and asks him how to dare he think that he can fight with him when he is taking him easy at first. He tells him that he was never a match for him and tells him that he is world class and abuses him. Mr. Park was unbelievable after seeing the Jisuk's power through his own 2 eyes, and he was in shock that he is so much powerful after Jai Young Yu that by the time Jisuk Yu is also unbelievably powerful. He peeks and sees Jai Young Yu from the corner of his eye, and he sees that because of Jai Young Yu, the influence of Shin HWA is going to expand. He says to Wooin that he fought well, but his opponent was way too powerful, so if he trains harder, he will show an improved version of himself. Suddenly, in a wheelchair, Jiwoo comes and, in a loud voice, calls Wooin. All of them turned around. Mr. Park thinks about who the boy is, while In Hyuk thinks about how he came to come here. Then Jisuk asks him that he called him a while ago, so why did he take so long to get there? Jiwoo is stunned to know that the person Jisuk is fighting with is Wooin. Wooin sees that Jiwoo Seo is hurt so badly that he can't even walk on his own. Professor asked Wooin why he was hanging his head like that. He says to Wooin that he has heard that Wooin is going to live at the place where they used to stay at, on which Wooin informs him that the committee has advised him to stay within their sights. So, he will be staying there for a while. The professor says to Wooin that if he needs anything, he can ask the committee. Wooin is surprised by listening to the professor, so he further tells him that it probably does not make sense to him as he knows that he looks this way now. But Wooin knows well how strong the professor's abilities are. Wooin says to him that he is elite for sure. He says that the kid Jiwoo, whatever his name was, explains to Wooin that he did not know they were friends as Wooin told him that the time when he was out of his mind, and it was too late for him to control himself. He says to Wooin, as he knows how he loses it from time to time. He regrets that he should not have done that to that kid as he was the first kid Wooin ever called his friend, and the fact that Wooin blocked the kid from him means that he cared for him. The professor tells Wooin that Jiwoo does not look like a bad kid, so he instructs him to get along. Wooin, while sitting on the ground, screamed at Jisuk and became too aggressive. Jisuk wonders what happened to him suddenly and abuses him. Wooin attacks him, who becomes shocked to see that he has this much strength in him. He tries to block the Wooin attack through his wind power. Mr. Kaden, Jiwoo, the chairwoman, Mr. Park, and In Hyuk are all watching the fight with full attention. As they continue their fight, Mr. Park thinks that there are only 3 other teens in their country known to be of the same rank as Jisuk. But still, Wooin is holding his own against him very well. He wonders how the professor managed to train such a powerful, awakened one. Jiwoo sees them with curiosity and thinks about why they are fighting like this. Jisuk asks Wooin where he comes from, as he is another annoying fellow, and says that he is surprised because no one has known of his existence until now. He then tells him to get this over with, and both attack each other. They attacked each other with their full force. There is an all-around wind in that place, and no one can open their eyes either, as all of them are protecting themselves with their hands. Jiwoo opens one of his eyes and sees that Jai Young Yu is using her powers to protect herself. Mr. Kaden sees her and concludes that it's impressive while they both are attacking each other. For Mr. Park, it is hard to believe that they are just teenage, awakened ones fighting. Mr. In Hyuk thinks that Wooin is very impressive. However, Mr. Kaden thinks that those little youngsters are really going at it. The walls, even the ground, get cracked. In Hyuk thinks that it is not good because if both of them continue like this, both of them will get serious injuries. He asks Mr. Park to stop Wooin while he stops Jisuk. Both go near them and grab them. In Hyuk grabs Jisuk while Mr. Park grabs Wooin. Mr. Kaden gets angry to see that they both interfere and stop the fight, as it is like killing the mood because the fight is just getting exciting. Jisuk asks In Hyuk why he is interfering, and he tells him that it is enough. Jisuk gets aggressive and says to him that he has only started, so what did he mean? His sister also tells him that it is enough, but if he desires to fight more, Then he can go against her. After listening to her, Jisuk tells her that it is not necessary to fight against her. Mr. Park says to Wooin that the same goes for him, too, but he says that he wants to keep fighting. Jisuk tells his sister that the other kid also doesn't want to end the fight, and he is kind of liking Wooin. Mr. Inhyak asks Wooin the reason for fighting with Jisuk and why he so deeply wants to continue the fight. Wooin turns his head around and looks at him. Inhyak asks him why he is not answering and looks at Jiwoo instead. He asks Wooin if he is fighting with Jisuk because of Jiwoo. Jisuk tells Mr. Inhyak that Jiwoo is the reason that Wooin is fighting with him because Wooin asked him about Jiwoo, and he asked him if he was the reason that Jiwoo was in the hospital. Mr. Inhyak asks Wooin, could it be that Jisuk injured Jiwoo? Jiwoo is surprised to know this, while Jisuk is also shocked to know it and asks if Wooin is serious as he attacked him because of what he did to Jiwoo. Wooin asks Jisuk why he cares as if he is trying to say that it's not his doing. Jisuk tells him that he is not the reason as he also gets injured, but Wooin tells him that it is not that it is happening the first time. He asks what he is talking about, and Wooin tells him that he and his friends have been